Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались з кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння, різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 659 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And also, if I sound a little bit different tonight, that's because I'm actually in Mobile, Alabama, and I'm in a hotel. So sorry if I sound demure, but it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news of the war in Ukraine here on a brand new week with massive news that the Russian forces have taken some of the highest losses that we've seen in a single day's period of fighting. Nearly 1,300 Russian soldiers have been lost just today, and we're going to be going over every single video and clip that we were able to find from the past 24 hours to show why the losses were that high and why the Russian army has not been able to gain hardly an inch of ground again over this past 24 hours. Going into the first bits of news that we have tonight, we did get to see that near the Bakhmut area, it appears that some Ukrainian forces were making sure to keep the Russian soldiers entertained and also find a way to increase these casualties and losses that the Russians sustained over this past 24 hours. Here in this little clip, we got to see a Ukrainian drone drop an M67 frag grenade onto a Russian position. The Russian tried to play hot potato and inevitably failed. We can see the grenade dropping down right there into the dugout. The Russian then tries to play hot potato, fails, and then the grenade explodes. It appears that he was a loser. But nevertheless...
He grabbed the grenade and said, "It's a hot potato, this means I can make it more vodka, bleed."
Dude, this guy sat there and he said, "Oh, grenade, Kobe, bing!" And then it fell right back down into the trench. Oh, my Lord. Oh, goodness. I've got to tell you, that man there, he is not having a great day. But Moving on from that clip and into our next one near the Bakhmut area, we also got to see something really neat. We got to see a Ukrainian soldier using, I believe it's called a GP-25, and it is, grenade launcher. These things fire a 40mm fog grenade, kind of like the big old AGS grenade launching auto guns, or more so machine guns. This is the same thing, but underslung under an AK-74, and a lot like the M203 grenade launchers you see here in the US military. But check it out. We're going to be muting that, because if y'all didn't know, we did get copyrighted for last night's stream over a song. So we have to, of course, be very vigilant so that way y'all don't have to see ads if y'all click on the stream after it runs. But we can see him loading the grenade, firing it right there, and there it goes. We rarely ever get to see these little GP-25s in use. And while from what we understand, they were getting somewhat common towards the collapse of the Soviet Union, it just doesn't really appear that a lot of Russian or Ukrainian forces end up using these things. So an example of one on the front lines is incredibly rare. But moving on from that, and on into our next bit of news outside of Bakhmut, because we're going to be actually, you know what? We're going to move on down here really quickly into the area of Kurdyivka, because the United 24, which many of y'all know is an amazing nonprofit organization directly tied to the Ukrainian government that's been doing some incredible work, they were able to once again put out a video that specifically talked about some of the amazing air assault brigades that have been fighting on the front lines. Much like the Russians have the VDV, which is their equivalent of the airborne units, much like the 101st Airborne or the 82nd Airborne here in the United States, or the British Paras, which many of our British viewers would know, the air assault brigades are almost the same thing for the Ukrainians and are some of their higher trained units, at least on the infantry level. Put into sometimes the most difficult areas of frontline fighting, they usually stand to test their own mettle time and time again. Almost every single battle they are in, it is almost always a major one. And today we got to see the United 24 made a very interesting video generally covering almost all of the air assault troops that they have in the Ukrainian armed forces and what they have been doing. And it's a very informational and very educational video, because a lot of what happened today in most areas of the front line were either done by mountain brigades or air assault brigades, much like the ones we're about to be hearing about in this clip. And so without further ado, here we go.
Soldiers who always deploy in the hottest zones. Dozens of successful operations across the entire front line, and the longest raid of armored vehicles behind enemy lines in history. So who are the airborne assault troops, these daring soldiers that undertake the most challenging missions?
The cool thing about the airborne troops is that there is no babysitting. It's about preparation for all sorts of shitty situations. They teach you to do 10 things at once. Airborne troops, that's powerful.
Mariinka, Bakhmut, the defeat of Russians near Bilohorivka, the defense of Kyiv, Kherson, Mykolaiv, the destruction of nearly 100 enemy air means of attack. The airborne troops always fight in the hottest spots, and they fight successfully. In late October, Russians attempted a sudden assault on airborne troops in the Donetsk region. As a result of just one battle, 5 tanks, 4 IFVs, and 20 invaders were destroyed. At the end of November, a Ukrainian assault group broke through the enemy's defense, cleared bunkers and trenches. On that day, they managed to free another several hundred meters of Ukrainian land. In the fall, airborne troops played a crucial role in liberating Klishchiivka in the Bakhmut direction. Their overall task is to be where it's most needed.
First of all, I think that this is the skill to quell your own fear and the instinct of self-preservation. Because when you are going to the position, everything is trying to kill you.
All this was
Now, really quickly to explain what's special about a unit like an air assault brigade. Air assault brigades are what we would consider in the modern day to fill in what in older times of warfare would have been the cavalry's role. These are units that are somewhat fragile when put into a bad situation, much like cavalry would have been during the Napoleonic era, but at the same time, if used effectively, they can be truly devastating to whatever they're coming up against. Much like the cavalry of the olden times, for example, the Napoleonic Wars, the modern airborne infantry are incredibly well trained and very well equipped. That's something that we've seen as a standard amongst all Ukrainian air assault brigades, and something that we've largely seen as a standard amongst the Russian VDV. VDV, at least by a Russian standard, until the new brigade was raised and put onto the front lines about 2 weeks ago in the Kherson direction at Crimea, which has ended up being an unmitigated disaster. And we actually have some confirmed reports from the British Ministry of Defense confirming what we were saying about that situation nearly a week and a half ago. But nevertheless, these soldiers are very easy to move around and rapidly deployable, especially compared to other kinds of units that the Ukrainian armed forces have. And the Ukrainians, much like the Russians with the VDV, use this to their effect. They get these guys wherever the heaviest battles are going, wherever an offensive is happening, they're putting these guys up front because they are the ones who are the quickest to move from location to location. Wherever things have gotten severe enough, they can be there probably within several days. But moving on from that and into the rest of the video.
Accomplished despite Ukrainians not being able to use the advantage of airborne forces, sudden airdrops. Russia fears crossing the front line with planes, but still dominates the sky.
At the moment, no one is jumping with parachutes because the sky is dangerous. We are doing artillery work, plus work on the ground, on different objects, forest belts, and so on.
You know, that guy got me worried for a second. He said, no one's jumping with parachutes. I'm like, huh? What? Why do you specify with parachutes? What's he mean?
Nobody's jumping with parachutes. As he sits over there, you just hear boom, boom, boom. As you just sit there and your eyes go wide, you're just saying the thing, wait a minute, they're all jumping to their death. But, yeah, you know, that's something that's also a little interesting as well about the airborne units of former Soviet nations, much like Ukraine and the Russian Federation, is that while in the U.S. we still train our airborne forces to be able to jump from aircraft, you know, and actually use a parachute, usually our airborne units are more so helicopter related these days than they are aircraft related. But in the former Soviet Union, it's actually completely different. They're still largely aircraft based, and we even saw that way early on in the beginning of the war, the Russians actually trying to drop off VDV forces by Ilyushin 76, meaning that they were dropping them out of the back of a transport plane pretty much. It ended up not working. From what we remember during the Battle of Kyiv, there was around 2 of those IL-76s shot down, and none of them were able to successfully drop their troops into their landing zones. So going off of that, we can tell that the era of the aircraft drop paratrooper is most likely dead, I would assume. And that's also why modern Western doctrine and U.S. doctrine in particular has made such a massive doctrinal shift from aircraft dropping paratroopers to helicopter dropping paratroopers instead, because that's a lot more safe, that's a lot more effective, and most likely more efficient as a whole.
And types of landing, from a helicopter, from an airplane. But you can also land with heavy equipment, jump out of an APC to the ground, and advance. This is also a landing. Then comes an assault. Assaulting is quite challenging because it requires willpower and strong character. You have to suppress the fear within yourself and act to complete the objective.
Assaults and exceedingly complex tasks are the specialization of paratroopers. My favorite story is about the Ukrainian 95th Brigade. It is the best brigade of its kind in the world. I know for sure because
I'm going to have to really quickly say, I think the 82nd, and I don't mean to get in that rivalry here in the U.S. military, I think the 82nd Airborne most likely would be the one to claim best airborne unit anywhere around the world. I'm sure everyone's going to fight me about that. The British are going to hop in and be like, then the Germans are going to pop in and be like, But I think the 82nd Airborne is probably one of the best. But anyways.
I've seen a lot of them, said the former U.S. Marine and Margaret Thatcher's advisor, Philip Carber.
If it wasn't for the airborne forces of Ukraine, this war would have already been lost.
Carber refers to the famous raid by the 95th Brigade, which he called the largest and longest raid of armored vehicles behind enemy lines in recorded military history. In July 2014, due to Russian military aggression, Ukrainian units found themselves surrounded in the southeastern part of the Luhansk and eastern Donetsk regions. To break the encirclement, a bold plan was developed. 1,000 fighters from the 95th and several other brigades marched over 470 kilometers, including 170 kilometers with combat engagements. During the raid, Ukrainians destroyed several checkpoints and Russian artillery divisions that were already on the Ukrainian side of the border. Most importantly, the 3,000 fighters and over 250 pieces of equipment broke out of the encirclement. The mobility of paratroopers allows them to be deployed anywhere where an unexpected strike can annihilate the enemy.
And while we're speaking of unexpected strikes, the live chat has gone feral, Matthew. I don't know if you've seen it, but everyone is arguing about what airborne unit is better. The 101st, the 82nd, and every other airborne unit out there. So really quickly, Matthew, if you can, put up a new poll that asks, what is the best airborne unit? And we can only have 4 options, y'all, sadly. I wish we could throw down all kinds of options, and we're only going to be considering Western ones in this poll. So, here are the options, Matthew, and hopefully, if you want at any time, you can throw this up, because I know we have one running right now. But the 82nd Airborne, the 101st Airborne, the British Paras, just as a whole, and also the Fallschirmjäger, which is the German Airborne Forces.
How do you spell that?
Fallschirmjäger?
Yes.
I believe you spell it Falschirmjager. I believe that's how Fallschirmjäger is spelled, if I can remember that correctly. And so
it looks like it might be remotely correct, but people will know.
Hopefully people will know. Just put German paras instead. You know, they'll get the picture. Fallschirmjägers. Y'all know what German paratroopers are. Anyways, getting back to this video. So many of y'all are throwing in different options. And I have to tell y'all this, y'all, because I know some of you are going to be like, wait a minute, my option isn't on the poll. I'm so sorry, y'all, because sadly, we can only put down 4 options in a poll. I wish YouTube would give us more than 4 options, but on ones like on options like these where there's an endless number of airborne units out there, it kind of limits us to only picking a handful of them. So out of the 4 that we're running, which one is your favorite of those 4? But I love to see all the ones that people are bringing up. The 501st Airborne, which is a very good one as well. The 1st Air Cav, which is very famous for being the air cav that was under command of Colonel Hal Moore at the Battle of Ai Drang in 1965, and really claimed, I guess, the idea of hell-born doctrine for the airborne forces as a whole throughout the rest of history. But sadly, we can't include them all, and hopefully we'll get some interesting results out of this next poll.
It's no wonder that the motto of the airborne troops is always first.
Our unit carries out tasks in tank dangerous areas and at the junctions between battalions and anywhere assistance in destroying tanks is needed. We work with javelins, fagots, and Stugna P. In total,
they're just trying to get us banned off of YouTube at this point, aren't
Yeah.
they? I mean,
What was that?
just said it. Just said the name of the ATGM just like it was. Just raw it out there. Thanks. Thanks very
we've
much.
already destroyed over 40 armored vehicles.
In addition to anti-tank weapons, the airborne troops are equipped with a variety of military equipment. As an elite force, the airborne troops have been supplied with modern Western weapons, including Australian Bushmaster armored vehicles and French VOB armored personnel carriers. The Challenger 2 tank has particularly impressed paratroopers.
It's like a sniper rifle in the world of tanks. It set a world record hitting a T-55 from 5 kilometers away.
The fighters have already experienced the fundamental difference between the Soviet and Western technological approaches.
I've driven T-64, T-72, and T-80. I fought on the T-80. It only has one run. Once you're hit, you don't have many chances. The ammunition immediately detonates, and you go flying through the air. Then they pick you up from the fields. But in this tank, the ammunition is arranged in a way that it can withstand several hits. Even if it gets hit, a detonation is not guaranteed. Everything's designed for the people.
Talking about unusual equipment, reconnaissance units of the airborne troops use almost silent electric bikes of Ukrainian production, capable of reaching speeds of up to 70 kilometers per hour. As soon as the airborne troops receive new weaponry, they send its samples to their training camp. The training of airborne forces has become in a way legendary. The day of a recruit begins at 6 a.m. and ends at 10 p.m. Throughout this time, they train with almost no breaks. The main challenge is a 315 meters obstacle course, which includes 10 elements, an area with barbed wire, a concrete obstacle in flames, clearing of vehicles, clearing of buildings, and as a bonus, evacuation of a wounded soldier through all these stages. The standards for paratroopers include about a dozen physical exercises, running, swimming, endurance and agility exercises, hand-to-hand and knife combat, and even a sapper shovel combat. Intense training plus modern weaponry, and the paratroopers indeed become an elite force even on the international level. In 2018, the organizers had to change the scenario of the Sabre Junction global military exercise. The objective for Ukrainian paratroopers from the 95th Brigade was to scout the enemy's forces' location. However, in addition to the initial task, they also captured the entire operational tactical center of the enemy battalion, along with all the documents. Continuing training according to the plan after such an event made no sense. It's not surprising that nearly 30 paratroopers have been honored with the highest state award, the title of Hero of Ukraine. One of them is Major Vladislav Bandar. Early in the full-scale invasion, he sustained severe injuries and lost an arm.
President Volodymyr Zelensky asked about my condition. I replied that I'm still motivated, feeling positive and confident that my arm is still on the front line, continuing to shoot the enemies.
After rehabilitation, Vladislav returned to his brigade. The oath of the servicemen of the Airborne Assault Forces includes the following words: I will never accept defeat. I will never retreat in the face of difficulties. I am a defender of freedom and the people of my country. I am a paratrooper of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The Airborne Assault Forces continue to uphold their oath.
3D printer noises. And that's the end of the video. But a very interesting look at Ukraine's airborne units, and a really interesting thing just overall to talk about how they're used on the battlefield by the Ukrainian army, because they're a very different unit than many others. And it's just very cool to hear about them. And of course, there are airborne units pretty much everywhere, sprinkled in amongst the rest of the Ukrainian front lines. There are airborne units up in the area of Kupiansk. There are airborne units right now in the area of Bakhmut and Avdiivka. And not only that, the 82nd Airborne of the Ukrainian army, not the U.S. Army, is currently near the Irkiv area right now. And there's also some airborne units near Kherson as well. They are all over, and truly an amazing kind of a unit. But moving on into something that a lot of y'all have been talking about, out of the 4 options we had to pick of from the best units, the best airborne units we could put up as options here in the West, the results have been something that I was expecting. And I have seen some people say that it's not right to poll the public because they're not military, you know, most of them aren't, and they don't know. And that's not really the point of the poll. That's not the spirit of it. It's just to ask the folks, what do you think is the best airborne unit? And just to see what their opinion is. But Matthew, what are the results? Because they are incredibly interesting looking.
So out of the 4 results of which one is the better airborne unit, I see some people arguing whether or not these are actually airborne units, so we'll assume that they are airborne units for now. But 42% said the 101st, 32% said the 82nd, 17% said the British Paras, and 9% said the German unit here. I can't really say that. I don't know how to pronounce it. There we go. Perfect. And I think the 101st was probably the most popular because most people have probably heard about it. That's the one I've heard about the most, and that's the one I voted for. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that, in my opinion, the 82nd Airborne is my favorite of the airborne units, just because it's a neat one and it's also interesting. To be honest with y'all, the 101st is famously known, especially because of its actions in northern France during the D-Day invasion of June 6th of 1944. But after that, it's had a little bit of a questionable history, I'm not going to lie. General Schwarzkopf actually mentioned the 101st Airborne in his autobiography and talked about how the unit, I believe it was in the late 50s and early 1960s, was terribly mismanaged by the commanders and was practically, in his opinion, next to the level of incompetence on almost every single level in the unit. That doesn't, of course, speak for the 101st in the modern day, but considering that was starting to happen because everyone was just high on their laurels saying, you know, oh, we're the 101st, we can't do anything wrong, and then they started to get complacent, I would have to say that the 82nd Airborne is probably the best in my opinion. Now, I do not mean at all to say that the Fallschirmjäger or the British Paras are terrible airborne units. They are amazing and absolutely incredible and have some very interesting histories behind them as well, but still, at the same time, being an American, always going to be biased about America, much like everyone else is going to be biased about their own home countries. And I would have to say the 82nd is my favorite, in my opinion, for that reason. But with that, hope that does address that well. And also, Trister said 101st is air assault now, right? Yeah, from what I understand, most of the airborne units did move on into being air assault units and also largely using helicopters. I don't think there's a lot of airborne units anymore in the U.S. that use nothing but airplanes to drop off their forces. And let me check on that really quickly with the 82nd. Airborne, and let's see what they have. Also, by the way, this is the division patch for the 82nd Airborne, which looks really cool to me. I really like it. I think it's just the neatest. But
that is cool. You know, the 101st Airborne has the Screaming Eagle. That's the one I've seen the most.
Oh yeah, everyone sees that one loads. Like it's like the Airborne symbol around the world. Everyone knows what the 101st is. But I really like the Airbornes because it kind of reminds me of the Civil Defense logo, and I think the Civil Defense logo is pretty drippy. But anyways, moving on from that.
Pretty drippy, I gotta say.
That's just pretty damn drippy, I'm not gonna lie. But let's see here. Let's move on down through the long and storied history of the 82nd. And let's see, here we are at the Operation Just Cause. All of y'all know that one. Fun one. Happened in Panama. But let's see here. So, this was their organization. And let's see here. Let's take a look. Dang, we don't get any actual unit composition. It doesn't tell us anything much. So, let's see. We have the 80. Here's their aviation brigade. Here's their infantry brigades. But what's their transports? Are they helicopters or aircraft? It appears that in the invasion of Iraq, well, not really the invasion of Iraq, but during the Gulf War, it appears that they were used as one of the highly mobile units, which would fit the role of an airborne unit, out on the very far western flank that was used as the trapdoor to try and encircle Saddam Hussein's forces inside of Kuwait. So it looks like in that instance, they may have actually been using armored personnel carriers on the ground, but let me make sure. Let's see, Global War on Terror. We can actually see them dropping out of the back of a C-130 Hercules in 2006. So they still were doing paradrops, and I believe the 101st still does that in training as well, but I would have to double check and make sure. We can see some of the 82nd in Katrina, well, in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. And here we go, right here. Here is a picture of the 82nd Air Mobile using CH-53C Stallions, or Super Stallions, to be transported from place to place. So it does appear that, at least going off of this, the 82nd is a lot like the 101st in the modern day, and largely uses helicopters to transport itself instead of aircraft, because largely most U.S. and Western doctrines have moved well beyond using aircraft for the airborne units, and they've started to transfer the airborne units into being heliborne and using almost primarily helicopters in actual combat. Aircraft are very susceptible to being shot down, especially a transport aircraft. It is a large radar signature. Not only that, they have to fly several thousand feet above the ground, making sure that they are very visible to any kind of radar that's in the area, or manpads that may be near the landing site or in front of the landing site. It's incredibly dangerous. And helicopters, with their ability to fly incredibly low, are able to largely get around those problems, although they still exist to a massive degree, much like we saw the VDVs experience at the Battle of Hosmel at the very beginning of this war. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and got down a little bit to the bottom of it, because I was also getting confused. I was like, wait a minute, is the 101st really an airborne unit anymore, and is the 82nd an airborne unit? And it looks like they still largely are. But anyways, moving on from that little clip in Bakhmut, great to hear about the air mobile brigades, and it's now time for us to move on into the raw juice. Many of y'all have heard about this today, and I have to say it was really neat to say. President Zelensky has actually traveled from Oslo in Norway down to Wiesbaden near Frankfurt, and he was able to visit the U.S. headquarters for the Armed Forces of the United States inside of Europe and Africa today, which was a really cool little clip to see. Here it is. And also, I love the little Sherman that they have sitting out front. So they're playing the Ukrainian anthem. Also dude, I love these. The M14s for the ceremonial rifles. Beautiful, beautiful option.
Very nice.
We now see them taking him into the building.
Today, this headquarters, Mr. President, has been dedicated for almost 2 years to supporting Ukraine. And we're so pleased to have you here today so that we can show you the operation. We were lucky to show it to Mr. Yermak the other day, and we're delighted and very, very honored to have you here, as you will see from the reaction of all the people who have been working here for you, sir.
Honor for me to be here.
We see a little Ukrainian flag wave.
Ще раз бажаю здоров'я. Маю честь сьогодні бути тут. Подякувати кожному, кожній з вас за велику працю, роботу і службу захищати нашу державу. І дуже радий, що ви працюєте такою командою разом з нашими партнерами, дійсно з нашими друзями. Я бажаю вам тільки перемоги, нічого більше не потрібно, це найголовніше. З неї починається життя і майбутнє. Я вам цього бажаю. І повертайтесь додому з перемогою. Вона у нас спільна. Дякую ще раз за службу. Слава Україні!
He did the thing! Matthew, quick, say it! Героям слава!
Героям слава!
Oh, and he's signing a Ukrainian flag. Pretty cool, pretty cool. And that rounds out the clip. It showed us a little bit of Zelensky's time at the U.S. headquarters for armed forces inside of Europe in Africa, which is very cool to see, and hopefully showed Zelensky a little bit more about how the United States has been operating on the logistical side of things within Europe, on trying to get the support from the United States into Europe and then into Ukraine. So moving on from that interesting little clip and on into our next one, speaking of Western events involving NATO, we didn't want to overplay this one today because, you know, this has happened many times now, and it doesn't really appear that anything major comes out of it, but we still consider it to be a major event on this channel, considering that it is technically a armed attack on NATO soil. Another Russian drone has crashed into Romanian territory again near the area of Izmail overnight and appears to have left an incredibly large crater, and as this picture shows, a massive fire was also burning on the Romanian side of the river. Once again, this is showing that Russian attacks are passing over into Romanian airspace and landing inside of Romanian territory. This is even after a joint operation by the United States and Romania to create an air defense perimeter that was 20 miles deep inside of Romanian territory to make sure that any Russian drones that were violating Romanian airspace would be shot down immediately. It appears that may not be the case, as this drone still ended up landing and exploding on Romanian territory again, and it appears to once again be a somewhat serious incident, at least on the diplomatic sphere. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Romania has expressed a very strong distaste for what has happened and has begun to make that quite clear. We have seen a similar statement like this from Romania before, which is what led to them creating the air defense perimeter, along with cooperation from the U.S. forces like the 101st Airborne, which is currently inside of Romania. And it appears that we will be seeing possibly even more reactions from the Romanians coming out of this recent attack that ended up hitting their soil. Moving on from that little bit of news and out of Romania and really most of the NATO news, we're now also, by the way, I forgot to mention this. Did y'all hear that Ukraine is actually going to be in the European Union and has gotten the green light from all EU members?
Excellent. I thought they just opened membership talks, so I didn't know they were actually like admitted.
No, Hungary has given the green light, so now they're going to start going through the actual official voting process to get them into the, I believe it's not the European Union exactly, something like the European Economic Union or something like that, where it's not like the full benefits in membership of the EU, but it's like halfway there. It's going to be the same situation that Turkey's in for the most part.
And so it's a good start, but it's not really all the way.
That's what I've heard, at least at the moment. It's kind of getting there. And at this point in the modern world, the European Union has become a lot more cautious about accepting everyone and anyone who wants to be a part of the European Union, especially after the Greek financial collapse of the early 2010s, which actually caused a decent amount of tremors throughout most of the European Union's economy. They actually have almost a tier system where you slowly get put officially into the EU entirely instead of just immediately throwing you in like most nations were during the later part of the 20th century. And that's really how everyone ended up joining the European Union, including Greece. They just kind of got accepted immediately, and they didn't have to go through multiple tiers to finally get to the platinum tier, which is being a full EU member. But moving on from that interesting little bit of news about Ukraine, which is great to hear because, and also let me say this really quickly because it does seem like things may be tied together. This happened after Zelensky spoke briefly to Viktor Orban in Buenos Aires in Argentina during the inauguration of the new Argentine president. It appears that that actually may be related because after that little discussion was had at that inauguration ceremony, now we're seeing that the official position of Hungary is now to give the green light to accession to Ukraine becoming a European Union member. So it's entirely possible that whatever Zelensky said actually did have an impact and has changed the mindset, at least on the diplomatic level, of Hungary, which is very interesting here. And I wish we still knew what was said, because we still have no idea what was said to Viktor Orban by Zelensky, but apparently it was something pretty profound. Moving on from that and into our next bits of news, which we have in our location unknowns, we have some really cool stuff today. Starting off with our first clip, we got to see that some lucky Ukrainian soldier got issued a FAMAS. Now, I have to say that through my experience with bullpups, I'm not that big of a fan of them. I have been able to shoot a Springfield Hellion and an AUG, and I think I've maybe been able to shoot one other, but I can't remember the name of it. And I'm just not quite a big fan of them. Their trigger pulls are a little weird, and also the AUG got me in the lip with the recoil because the ejection port wasn't open up to the right side. I'm a left-handed shooter; it was opened for a right-handed shooter, and so the brass ended up hitting me right in the lip. So I wasn't a big fan of that. Of course, if it had been done properly and I'd been paying attention, I would have been hitting the lip. But that's something that that's something I'm going to remember for the rest of my life, because it burned. It actually burned like a hot piece of steel. Well, it was a hot piece of steel, pretty much, just smacked me in the face. I was like, dang. It's that was burning hot. Luckily, no busted lip or anything. But at the same time, I think, in my opinion, conventional rifles like the AK and the M4 are just better to me. It's just
to me, it seems like the bullpup is such a bad platform, because all the other guns out there, like the M4, the AK, they're all kind of balanced somewhat, but the bullpup is pretty much weighted to the rear. So if you're trying to cross-train soldiers on different platforms, the bullpup totally messes them up, because all the other ones are weighted so differently. They really can't just, adapt to all of them at the same time.
And I would agree. And also, that's another thing, too, is that it is kind of weird to go from the weight distribution on a conventional rifle to a bullpup, because the weight distribution is completely different. On a normal rifle, it's usually kind of a little front heavy, but on a bullpup, it is completely back heavy, almost 90% of the time. And I never have actually held a bullpup that feels like it's balanced in the center. And that makes a lot of sense, because all of the heavier moving parts of a bullpup are in the buttstock, pretty much, where a conventional rifle would not have a lot of weight. And so all the weight's centered back there. It does make it easier to shoulder, but it's still a little weird, and I just don't think I'll ever be able to get past that. But beyond that, while I'm not necessarily a big fan of bullpups, the FAMAS is by no means a rollover or a pushover. This thing is really impressive, and I've got to say, it's a really cool little bullpup rifle. I really like them. The FAMAS was the rifle that the French adopted to replace the MAS 4956, which was their standard issued battle rifle throughout the entirety of, I believe, most of the Cold War, from about the 1950s up until about the early 1980s or late 1970s. It shot a 7.5 millimeter French cartridge, which is really weird because everyone else in NATO was using a 308, well, not a 308, a 7.62 by 51 or a 5.56 by 45 cartridge, except for France. And then finally, near the late 70s, early 80s, they adopted the FAMAS and actually implemented a 5.56 cartridge, finally bringing them up to the rest of the NATO standard. But really neat to see that a Ukrainian soldier has one of these things, because I just think they're really neat and have a very interesting history to them, and they're a pretty unique design. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on into our next one, where we got to see something that the Russians almost did today that would have been funny to see if it actually went down. They almost shot down one of their own attack planes with a Grad. Check it out. Here comes the Su-25 right there. And the Grad starts firing, and you see the Su-25 starts to bank left so that way it doesn't fly into the firing rockets. And there goes the Su-25, and there goes the Grad rockets as well. Almost a disaster. Almost. It was very close.
For the gram, blöd.
Doing it for the bang. Doing it for the bang. But with that, that's the end of the clip. Y'all know what I'm about to say. It is so funny. It's beautiful to see the Russians almost screwing up like that, because if they had screwed up like that, they would have destroyed $25 million minimum in an attack plane just from stupidity, as usual. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on into our next bit, where we also got to see some more drone footage from the SBU. It's your favorite. They're like the FBI, but dangerous. But you know, the FBI is kind of Anyways, here's some drone footage from the SBU. Y'all like to see it. We all love to see it. Everyone screams for the SBU. The Russians really scream when they see the SBU. They go, Oh God! But anyways, here's the clip.
Oh, Bliat, help me, help me.
Dude, right now the drone is saying there, "You can scream all you want, but no one's going to hear you." And the Russians inside the tank are going, oh man, it just cracks me up. This is a T-80, by the way, that they hit, and it's now on fire, and they're going to hit it again and again. Because there's no such thing as a double tap. In Ukraine, it's infinite tap. Just hit it as means. Wait a minute, was that a T-90M? That looked kind of like one. Hang on, let's look at that again. It might be a T-80 BVM instead.
And on the screen it said RX loss. The Ukrainians lost their prescription on the battlefield.
Damn it. That's it. How am I going to get my blood thinners? But anyways, we can see another drone coming down on top of another APC. Ooh! Juicy. And man, the SPU, like they go silent for like a week and they come back and they show that they destroyed like almost half of a battalion's worth of equipment. It's like, good on them. They do a really good job with the drone warfare. That, by the way, was a fuel truck, and I wish we had a third-person drone view on that one because it would have been explosive for sure. Well, you see them hitting a like Moss flatbed. We can also see them hitting a tarpaulin-covered Kamaz and a Ural 4320. And that Russian went running, man. He sat there like a deer. Look, he's right back there. He's like, "Oh, bled!" and goes running off the screen. Oh, they're
hitting. It's like his kneecaps wouldn't like move or something. He was just like stiff-legged, like crawling off.
Dude, he's got like 2 splints, and they put him back on the front lines. He's peg-legged. But anyways, we can see another drone coming on in. And with that, that's the end of those clips. But of course, very nice to see that the SBU was able to knock out an incredibly large amount of Russian vehicles of all kinds. Moving on from that and into our next clip. Speaking of LSA Sergeant Figment, and I gotta tell you, the Matrix, the Matrix. You know, Matthew, I'm going to have to work on speaking English at some point because I really have to perfect these skills. The CIA pays us a great deal of money to do this, so we eventually have to learn English, like, well. So
you know no English?
I know no English at all. But nevertheless, speaking of LSA Sergeant Figment's super chat yesterday, where he talked about firing a Galil and an Uzi while being in the Israeli Defense Forces, that brings us right back full circle today to the Uzi, because crazily enough, after he said that, pictures finally came out showing that the Ukrainians are in fact using Uzi submachine guns, at least for guys who are kind of like logisticians and in the reserve units and stuff like that. Guys who don't need a full-size rifle, they just need something that will get the job done. Here's one picture of a guy firing an Uzi. It fires a 9x19 cartridge, much like a Glock or really any pistol out there nowadays, because, you know, 9mm is your standard cartridge pretty much, rather than 45 ACP, which is still the latest, greatest, and best cartridge in my opinion. I miss you, John Browning. But moving on from that and into our next picture, we can also see this fella here with an Uzi as well. Now, these
That dude has no face. Like, that is literally no face. I don't see any features.
Dude, they tell him to save face, and lo, he has none. He's like, I have no face to save. But the Uzi is a pretty interesting little submachine gun. It was originally designed, I believe, around 1954, and was mass-produced for a long while. I think they're still used a little bit by groups to this day. I don't really know who those groups would be specifically, but still an interesting little submachine gun, and pretty interesting to see that these things have made it to the front lines in Ukraine, because honestly, I didn't think they would, but they are, and I was like, pretty neat, and what's neat? Oh, bless me, but pretty good to see.
Okay.
I almost blew my vocal cords out right there if you couldn't tell.
I'm so paranoid in this hotel that I'm being too loud, like we were in that apartment. I'm sitting there like jumpy, like so when you sneeze, I turn around like, oh my God, someone's at the door.
Wait, hang on. Matthew, in a second, you're going to sit there and hear this. Hey, keep it down!
I'm just waiting for it, man. I feel so paranoid in here. I'm telling you. I'm telling you.
Oh, man, I'm telling you. Dude, I literally hit my desk so hard with the butt of that rifle that, like, everything jumped around a little bit. So I'm trying to put everything back in place. But anyways, you know, Matthew is a little bit paranoid right now. And you know who should be paranoid, Matthew? The Russians. Because the casualties were almost records today. Record-breaking for the large part.
Oh, let's see it.
Ooh!
Oh my God. 9 Bobcats. Do y'all see this? Oh my God, man. 9 Bobcats in a day. That's crazy, man.
Oh my god, we're so freaking hype, dude. I feel like we're every other YouTuber now who like gets hype and then we get quieter because you can't be loud. But luckily, I'm not in a hotel. I'm at the house and in the basement.
To the freaking hall.
Look, an old Soviet hotel room, and no insulation at all. But moving on from that, 9 Bobcat skid steers were lost. But you know, like to be honest with y'all, that joke. We've kind of beat that horse dead, so 9 Bobcat skid steers, special equipment vehicles.
What the Bobcats? We hadn't beat that. We hadn't beat that dead. What are you talking about, man?
Like I don't know. I don't know. I was just saying that just to give the benefit of the doubt, just in case there are people.
That's a joke.
Man, it's a prank, bro. It's a prank. But speaking of pranks, the Ukrainians pulled 1,300 pranks on 1,300 Russian soldiers today. Getting pretty close to the record for pranks that the Ukrainians have done in a single day. And I gotta ask you, Matthew, do you think that when the Ukrainians were pranking each of these Russians, they went, "It's a prank, bro," and then got them? Do you think they did that?
It was a little too late for that. They said they looked down at the guy and they said, "Oh, he's sleeping. It's just a prank, bro."
No, better yet, Matthew.
What kind of prank is this?
Better yet, Matthew, you know what the Ukrainians did, because we've seen the clips enough, is that someone behind the FPV drone flying in was going, and then another guy was going, "Hit him, get him." Then they hit him, and we got him, yes. But anyways, 1,300, all jokes aside, 1,300 Russian soldiers were wiped out. And it's an impressively high number. It's actually very high. This is getting close to almost 2 entire battalion tactical groups of the Russian army being destroyed in a single day. It's only 300 short. Those kinds of numbers are very rare to come by. Even when the casualties were very high on a day-to-day basis, they were nearly always 900 to 1,000, never getting this high on just really a single day. But regardless, the numbers were huge. The numbers were also fairly big in other categories outside of the infantry. 22 armored personnel carriers were destroyed, along with 13 armored personnel carriers, 13 supply trucks, 10 main battle tanks, 12 artillery systems. It does appear that the Ukrainian counter battery may be slowing down for a little bit, most likely due to maybe supply issues perhaps, or something similar, but it will most likely pick up once there's more supplies and ammunition on the front lines. We did also see that Ukraine shot down 33 drones, a very high number, and most of those actually were shot down in the area of Odessa overnight, which we'll be getting to here in a second, and 1 MLRS was destroyed, which is very nice to see, because we don't get to see a lot of MLRSs getting blown up here, there, and all over the place, but still, very good numbers. Also, by the way, 10 cruise missiles were shot down too, because I think about 10 of them were shot towards Kyiv, and those were also successfully shot down. All in all,
excellent news.
It's excellent news, and these kinds of casualty reports are showing us that the Ukrainians are certainly bravely holding on to their ground and making sure to inflict the highest losses possible for every inch that the Russians gain or every inch that the Russians lose. Moving on from that little bit of news in the casualty report, it's time for us to get on into the rest of the frontline news in Ukraine. And also, before we get into that, I also have to say this because I forgot, we had no news. We didn't have no news. We did have some news, but there was not enough news once again to make an Israel news segment. It does appear that as far as the actual fighting inside the Gaza Strip is going, it has gotten incredibly sparse, and so we're not really getting a lot of chances to really try and cover that news anymore, because we rely entirely on picture and video evidence to back up what our statements and claims are, instead of just telling y'all to trust us, bro. And we hope that y'all enjoy that, because a lot of channels out there just say, "Trust me, bro," and I think it's a lot better to show y'all proof of what we're talking about news-wise, instead of just, telling y'all to trust us on what we're saying, because, the internet's not a place where you should just blindly trust people. That's my opinion. But sadly, we do not have that news segment, so all night, it's just going to be entirely about Ukraine and what's been going on here. Not only that, while we're going to be talking entirely about Ukraine, we also have to talk entirely about what y'all have been saying in the chat. A lot of y'all have been saying some really interesting stuff, and I highly recommend y'all that y'all stay around for this segment, because some of these polls were very interesting, and a lot of y'all had some very interesting opinions to say in the live chat on some of them as well, and we're going to be tying that in to what y'all voted on. And so, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so moving into our first poll and question segment. We already covered one poll earlier, so we have one more to cover. And the question is, the EU opens membership talks in Ukraine, but fails to pass the $54 billion aid package for the EU. And what are your thoughts? It looks like 46% said good news on membership talks, 24% said not good news, we need more results. 21% said, yeah, Ukraine really needed the aid more, and 9% said unsure. And first off, I'm very glad that the EU is opening membership talks for Ukraine. That is a very big deal. And hopefully they get beyond the economic or whatever alliance that is and actually into the real EU. That would be the biggest accomplishment that Ukraine could have on that front. And also, by the way, that $54 billion aid package, that is a ton of money. So I'm personally not shocked that it didn't pass, but I'm confident that something along those lines will pass eventually. But this one is a pretty big one, and it was going to be a tough deal to pass. So hopefully it gets passed soon, but it may be a little bit. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say it is very good to hear that the European Union is trying to get Ukraine into the Union. That is going to be a big benefit for Ukraine, mostly economically. And a lot of people have been talking about different things about the European Union, and I'll try and address this really quickly because I know for a lot of viewers, the European Union is kind of a weird enigma, and nobody really knows what to make of the European Union most of the time. And so let me try and explain a little bit about what I know of the European Union to explain the pros and cons that come with membership of the European Union. Because like with everything, while it's a huge benefit for Ukraine, there's also things that they have to change that they may not want to, and so it may be considered a con. We did also see that with the United Kingdom. You know, eventually the United Kingdom decided that the cons outweighed the pros and ended up actually removing themselves from the European Union, being the only member state that has ever done such a thing in the entire history of the EU. But talking about the benefits first, because the benefits for Ukraine is really where it's at. The cons don't really matter that much for the Ukraine because they kind of consider those to be the pros, but I'll go ahead and try and explain the pros of the European Union. One, it facilitates trade with every other EU member state very easily. It's unbelievably easy to trade from nation to nation inside the European Union. As a matter of fact, it becomes so easy, it may as well be like transporting fresh oranges from Florida to Alabama. It's almost the exact same way that trade is conducted here in the United States, and that's how it's conducted in the European Union. That could be a massive benefit to Ukraine, especially for industries like their agricultural industry, because unlike now where the Polish can go, you know, we don't really want to accept Ukrainian grain. If Ukraine became a member of the European Union, they are able to ship their grain really wherever they want, as long as it meets the applicable food laws and requirements inside of each individual state, which, like for example with Poland, the grain wouldn't meet the requirements. And so Ukrainian merchants would be able to sell the grain inside of a Polish market very easily. Also, another huge benefit of being a part of the European Union is that instead of having your own individual currency, which is subject to very fine and minute changes over time, inflation, deflation, stuff like that. In the European Union, the currency is much more stable and also has the backing of over, I believe it's like $15 trillion amongst all of its member states, which is a fairly decent currency and a fairly sound one to be a part of. Some countries opted not.
So Ukraine would have to give up the hryvnia and go to the EU money?
The
euro,
the
EU money.
EU money. I want some of that EU money. I want that thing that's not on the menu, dude. They pull out.
I'd kind of be sad about that, to be honest. Though, like they have to like lose the hryvnia. That's like losing like a piece of their country. Like to me,
yeah, it is sad. I'm not gonna lie because you know it's good economically for Ukraine. We can't deny that. And then in the end of things, the economic side of things in every country is all about what's going to benefit the nation the most. That's why the British moved on from the shilling system to the decimal system, as sad as that was, because back in the day they had shillings, pence, all that stuff, you know, the very interesting sounding currency names, and then they just went on to pence and pounds, and that's it, because it's on a decimal system now. And when the European Union eventually made its own currency, it completely got rid of the French franc and also the German Deutschmark and really every other currency that existed in any other member state since then. It's a little sad, but at the same time, it also provides a big benefit, and that's why so many countries are willing to get rid of their, national currencies and just go with the EU standard. The only one that didn't do that was the United Kingdom. They actually opted out, and that's why the British were able to keep the pound sterling even while being a full EU member since about 1973, and then withdrawing in 2020. But moving on back out of the United Kingdom's rare instance, because the United Kingdom is really the exception to the norm as far as the European Union has gone. The Ukrainians can enjoy a massive amount of economic benefits by being a part of the European Union. However, there is really no military guarantees or protection provided by the EU, and this is something of a misunderstanding by many people around the world, especially here in America. Many people here in America kind of view the European Union as a creation of a new United States, but instead of it being in North America, it's in Europe instead. And in the process of the EU forming, they're trying to create a standardized European Union army, among many other things. We have seen that the German and Dutch armies have pretty much molded into one, but that has largely happened ever since the 1980s. Really the 1970s, honestly. So that's not really anything exceptional or really special. And that's usually used as a point of panic here in the United States to say that, the European Union is some kind of a monster and it's ending up trying to, strip every nation of their abilities or powers and just have the European Union be a, homogenous government that just controls the entirety of the continent. That's kind of how that's argued here.
Homogenous, by the way.
Homogenous, not homogenous. Man, we getting that homogeny wood up in here. But nevertheless,
man, I want some of that EU money though. Can I have some EU money?
Man, I want some of that EU money. It's EU. But anyways, some of the cons, to quickly cover the cons. One of the cons is that the European Union actually has courts that are technically considered superior to the courts of the member states that reside within the European Union, which can strip nations of their ability to make their own decisions. It's very similar to the Supreme Court. Well, it's kind of like the Supreme Court of the United States, though, if you think about it. Should there be a Supreme Court, or should the state Supreme Courts be the Supreme Courts of their lands, or should there be one over that? That's kind of the same.
I think each state has its own hierarchy of court systems, if I can talk straight. But no, I don't like the idea of having like a central court for multiple nations. That seems like a conflict of interest, because different nations have different laws. So unless you're going to apply like a universal standard to every country and sort of strip them of their legal system, it seems kind of odd.
Well, it's kind of what the United States is. I mean, the United States was an amalgamation of colonies, which were different states, who then all decided to have a federal government and a centralized court that was supreme to even their own state courts. And laws are different in each state in the United States, but the Supreme Court can still step in and make decisions much like the EU Supreme Court can on its member states. So it's kind of the same thing.
Only if it deals with a federal question, though, Enforcer. Remember civil procedure. If it deals with a federal question of law, they can, but they can't interfere with state issues of law. That's left to the state Supreme Court.
Well, you got a good point. But I'm just trying to make sure that we stay, they're trying to view the pros and the cons here instead of just, trying to, be biased, because we're trying to make sure to put this out there as unbiased as possible. And then one of the other cons about the European Union is that you possibly may start to lose a decent amount of your national autonomy, and more so, instead of relying on the national government, you may start to rely more on the European Union Council, which could end up being a bit of an issue because the European Union Council is not elected, they're appointed. And that's ended up causing a decent amount of controversy, especially amongst the British, because they considered that to be a massive issue when they withdrew. But beyond that, those are really your major kind of pros and cons to the European Union, and that's what the Ukrainians are looking at right now. But I think it's absolutely great to hear, and I think that European Union membership for Ukraine is certainly a good thing for them. But with that, we are now on to the next one.
All right, and that was our last poll question to address. So we're moving on to our Super Chat segment. And up first, we have a very generous $150 donation from Mark. And this time, he has gotten rid of all the Latin, and now he's the kinetic possum. I don't know where he came up with the kinetic possum, but I kind of like it. So, Mark, thank you very much for that very generous support. And he says, how do you guys keep guessing who I am? And I need to work on my spycraft.
And Mark, we always know who you are because I get used to profile icons. I don't even have to see your name. I can just see your icon and I know who you are on the spot. I know that your icon is that light green with the white M, and that's your profile icon. So whenever I see that, I know it's Mark Slava Ukraini, mark the field marshal of the LSA, mark the Latin phrase, or mark the kinetic possum. I like the, honestly, I think you ought to keep with the kinetic possum, because that sounds sick as hell. For some reason, I'm like, man, that is a cool name. But still, that is how I know who you are. I know every single one of the profile pictures. If I see it enough, I know exactly who you are. And also, thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support, Mark, and helping this channel to keep running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you who went out of their way to support this channel, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And thank you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on rolling. And with that, I hope that does address that well. And I would say you don't need to work on your spycraft. Why spy? Because you know what they say, spies get fried. But still, with that, thank you so much once again. I came up with that on the spot. That's why I had to let out a forced laugh, because I was like, that didn't even sound that good. But still, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is going to go to Kevin J, who puts in a $100 donation. And thank you, Kevin, as well, for that very generous support and helping to keep us running, just like Mark. And Kevin says, Merry Christmas, and finally worked some OT. So here's some for you to keep up the great work, and love you guys, and take a live chat question.
And thank you so much, Kevin J, for supporting this channel according to YouTube for the first time ever. I gotta thank you so much for that, and that is massive support to be the first time that you've sent in a super chat. So that is unbelievably kind and generous of you, and thank you so much. And also, Merry Christmas to you. Christmas is around the corner, only 15 days away. Can y'all believe that? Because honestly, to me, it feels like Christmas is still at least a year away. The year has flown by, and law school has fried my brain to where I have no concept of reality or time anymore. I've moved beyond those mere mortal concepts and into hell itself. But nevertheless, I do thank you so much for the incredible support and the kind words. And thank you so much for supporting the channel, because your support is going to be able to help us to keep up the great work. And while I always say that about super chats and say that it's what makes this channel possible, the honest truth is that we're going to make this channel possible with viewer support or without viewer support. That's largely been proven over these past few months, specifically last month and this one, because the support that we've gotten has greatly decreased for good reasons. A lot of people are having to focus on other things. And also there's, some things going on in the background that we're not going to say on stream that is probably affecting a lot of people. But nevertheless, it's not stopped our determination and our drive to be able to make sure that we cover this news the best we can every single night. And folks like you who support massively like that help us to be able to make sure that things in the background are not that big of a stressor for us, and we're able to focus all of our attention entirely on the stream and make sure that the news is good and well delivered. And so thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support, Kevin J, and we will make sure to grab a live chat. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
All right, and also before we grab that live chat question, I don't know if it's just me, but for some reason it doesn't feel like Christmas is coming right around the corner. It's like, I think about 10 days away or something like that, and it feels like it's not even December. I don't know why. Unfortunately, you feel the same way.
I feel like Christmas, I don't really feel holidays anymore. Like, it doesn't, like, no part of the year it's like, oh yeah, this is the 4th of July time of year, or the Thanksgiving time of year, or the Halloween time of year, or the Christmas time of year. Honestly, I don't even feel that anymore. Like, my life has been so busy since we started doing this. Like, the time just meshes together and everything feels like the same day pretty much to me. It's like Groundhog Day. It's hell. Help me. Help me escape, y'all. Help, get me out of here. But still, I'm just kidding around. I have a fun time doing this. I love doing it. But still, I hope that does address that well, Matthew, because for me, I have not felt a single holiday. I've never felt like it's holiday season since we've started running this channel, because this channel just takes priority over everything else. So I don't get time to like sit and think, oh yes, it's Christmas. So I'm like, yeah, it's another day. We got to keep things running. But with that,
I'm telling you, man, it may not be Christmas Day yet, but it is a work day. I'm telling you. And with that being said, we're moving on. We're moving on to that live chat question, which goes to Jonathan Schott, who says, with another hit in Romania, how close do you think we are to a NATO Article 5?
I think we're pretty far away, to be honest. And that's a great question, because a lot of people would think, and I would logically think as well, that would get us pretty close to Article 5. But we've seen time and time again, because this is at least the 6th or 7th time a Russian drone has landed on Romanian territory and exploded, that every single time, both Romania and the larger Western powers that be largely try and turn a blind eye to that situation, make a diplomatic protest, and that's about it. So I don't think we're actually very close to Article 5 at all. I think we're actually a pretty good ways away from it. but I don't think we should be. I think when things like that happen, we need to at least make a stand for the statement of it. We don't have to be completely adamant. We could just bluff our way into saying, if that happens again, we are going to go to war with Russia. But it's the principle that counts. And I don't like the principle of watching Romanian sovereignty, it being a NATO country, being violated by the Russians continuously, and we don't really do a lot in response, and neither do the Romanians, or really the Western world as a whole. I don't think that's a good move, especially because it shows the Russians that they can slip up and nothing will happen. And who knows, one day those slip-ups are going to become fatal, and it's going to kill some Romanian citizens. And then what are we going to do? And what is everyone going to say? And I'll tell you what they'll say. Matthew, I bet you know it too. As soon as one of those drones kills a couple of Romanians, they're going to go, oh my God, someone should have stopped these terrible Russians. If only there was someone out there who would have known about this or done something to stop this. This was an atrocity and the Russians need to pay for it. And we could have stopped it from happening at the start and made sure that nobody was killed if we had made a firm and strong enough statement. That's what's going to happen. It's coming down the pipe.
Or worse yet, they'll simply say, "Oh, it was an accident," and I'm sure that Putin or the Kremlin officials will come out and say, "Oh, it just accidentally veered off course or whatever." And shockingly enough, even though people would probably get killed in that instance, I think they'd probably still overlook it even at that.
Yeah, I have a feeling that they might. That's what happened with Poland, but then in the end, that was a misfire from Ukraine, and S-300 veered off course and ended up falling and exploding in Polish territory. But nevertheless, I don't think we're actually going to be seeing a lot of it. I hate to say that because I honestly wish it was different. I wish that we would take a stand to defend the lives of Romanian citizens, but it's a different world that we live in than the one I would have us living in because, not to rabbit hole on this way too much, but if you're a member of NATO, a lot of people look at NATO as kind of being a nuisance. I look at NATO as being a great asset, not just for the United States, but also for Europe as well. It's a mutual security pact amongst everyone. And we have as much of a responsibility to Romanian citizens in their protection by this defensive pact as we do American citizens, at least when a nation is being attacked by another. And for that reason, I think that it's important that we make sure to make a stand for these Romanian citizens. Sure, they're not Americans. Sure, they're not from, every NATO country, and it doesn't affect really any NATO country rather than Romania itself. But they're a part of this defensive pact, and they're due the same protections and same securities that many of the major powers would have if this was happening to them. And that's what I think we should go off of as NATO policy, because the Romanians are as equal of a partner of this alliance as the Poles, the Germans, the British, the French, the Spanish, the Italians, the Canadians, the Americans, and everyone else. But with that, I hope that does address that well. And if y'all like that statement, you know who to vote for in 2040. But with that, I hope that does address that question fairly well. And we are on to the final question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving into the news.
Whoa, come on, man. We're moving on to the next one, which goes to Darren Maynard, who puts in a $100 donation. And thank you, Darren, very much as well for that massive support. Bro, we're getting some massive support and super chats tonight, so huge thanks to you all for that. And Darren says, I look forward to seeing your news when I can, and sometimes my work keeps me away for months at a time. And Slav Ukraine.
And Slav Ukraine. And thank you so much for the huge amount of support, Darren Maynard, and helping this channel to keep rolling. And I've got to say thank you all so much tonight, and also for last night, for the massive amount of support that y'all have given. We've been concerned recently about how things will run behind the scenes. Of course, trying to keep this thing running, but it's always been greatly concerning. I gotta thank all of y'all so much for all the support that y'all have been giving to this channel yesterday and today, because it takes a lot of stress off of my shoulders and Matthew's shoulders, knowing that we will be able to make sure that everything behind the scenes runs well. And so thank you so much for that. And also, Matthew just asked me, and I had to tell you this, Darren, because he probably hears the rapping of something rattling in the background. Yes, I did just grab a bonbon, Matthew. I did, because I sat there and I was like, man, I gotta have one of these things. Y'all know what I'm talking about really quickly. And also, Darren, let me, I bet you like rabbit holes, because you have to enjoy rabbit holes to be supporting this channel. Have y'all ever had the little strawberry wrapped candies that are kind of like gushy on the inside, but they're hard on the outside? That's what we call a bun bun. I think they're called bun buns generally, but they're
made in Europe, actually.
Oh, they're so good. They are the best candy out there, in my opinion, and I love the things. Matthew got a pack of these things. What is it, 2 pounds of that stuff?
It was 2 pounds off of Amazon because I couldn't find them locally, so I had to order them.
Man, and they are good. I got a handful of these things. I have them over there sitting on our set for our gun reviews that we're still working on right now. Sadly, that's falling a little bit behind schedule because there was a bit of a medical emergency that popped up in the middle of the week and we didn't know what was going to be happening, so this got put on hold. Sorry about that, but regardless, we are still working on that. But to get back to Darren Maynard's super chat, I thank you so much for enjoying the news when you get to watch it. And I got to thank you for being here tonight and supporting the channel because you're making this thing possible. And like I was saying earlier, y'all are helping us to take a lot of stress off of our backs and make sure that everything behind the scenes for us will run well and we'll be able to run smoothly. And we can put all of our attention and all of our focus onto this show. And I got to thank you so much for that. And I got to thank you for being a long-time viewer as well, Darren, because you've been around for an incredibly long time. And not only that, you've helped to keep this channel running as well. And that is two massive things that I couldn't ask of anyone. And yet, you're still here doing it. And thank you so much once again. And I hope that you enjoy the stream tonight since you're here to watch. And also, Slava Ukrainian, thank you so much once again. And with that, we're now going to be moving on out of this question segment. And thank you to all of y'all once again. And on into the Northeastern Front. Because today, we saw a little bit of a push and a pull. And to start off with the push, we saw that Russian forces launched an offensive onto the villages in Kyiv, and we can see that in this clip right here. We can see the Russian column and a dirty sock. And we can see this part of the Russian column has stopped and is, in fact, doing some interesting stuff. I don't really know how to explain it. We now see them dropping off their infantry. No spacing whatsoever amongst the APCs. They're going to run someone over before they're done with. And we can see the APCs moving on. It appears that they're under artillery fire, though. And we can also see... Oh, wait a minute. Hang on. Oh... You know what, y'all? You know how I said, oh, a Russian soldier is going to get run over before this is all over with? Well, look, lo and behold, that's what the arrow is pointing out. One of them got run over. I don't think they disembark the infantry without running at least one of them over every single time. They're literal hamsters. They're like lemmings. You know, they just find the weirdest things to do to end up causing casualties. And then, oh, wait a minute, by the way, if y'all thought it couldn't get worse, because I thought it couldn't get worse, watch this. You see, this is, there's one of them, you know, that's been mushed. And then this BMP, on the way out, backs over him a second time. And we can see the artillery landing as the Russians are now retreating after their failed attack. And also, Barry Woodward, that is... unfortunately not true. That was on some specific merch items that we ran when we originally opened our merch store, and at the moment we have temporarily closed our merch store to try and address some things about it that we found out after a little while. But moving on from that, we can see here some Russian forces that appear to be under fire or firing at a house inside the village of Sinkivka, which is filled with the Ukrainian soldiers. And it looks like some of them have ended up taking naps. And we see one of them making a run for it.
They can't sleep on the job like that. That should be against the law.
Like Zoink Scoop, I think they're sleeping. No workers' comp. But we can also see a Russian right there. Crawling around a tree stump. Like Zoink Scoop, I think she's... I can't say the real one. I don't think I can. But anyways... That's the end of the clip right there.
Do you think if I did that super loud like I usually do and wake up the whole hotel with dude and do the Scooby-Doo imitation, how fast do you think I'm going to get beat out of this hotel?
dude, the manager's going to come up and go, okay, time to go. You're going to be like, aw, damn. But anyway, with that, we're moving on to the next one as we laugh about the possibility of Matthew getting kicked out of the hotel. And into the next clip, we also got to see that the Ukrainians immediately counterattacked the Russian forces that were dropped off and began to push them out, including the capture of 6 prisoners of war. Here's the clip. with epic action music. Here we can see the epic Ukrainian main battle tank firing on the Russian positions. Wow. Call that an explosive entrance. We can now see the Ukrainian soldiers taking Russian prisoners of war and also greasing them up like some kind of a car. Wow, what a lotta. And that's a whole lot of Russian prisoners right there. I don't know why I'm talking like that. Anyways, we can see them moving through the trenches and clearing them out. And we now see them taking Russian prisoners. 4, 5, and 6. 6 Russian prisoners.
Go get them, Jack. I mean, just get them.
I gotta tell you, the bonbons have never been sweeter as we watch these Russians getting captured. And it shows that their not their counterattack, but their little offensive in this area failed pretty miserably. It literally, as soon as it started, it fell apart, and then all it took was a small Ukrainian counterattack to push them right back out and end up taking 6 prisoners. But with that, we're now moving on to our next clip near Verkhnya Duvanka, where we got to see an FPV drone fly straight into a tank. And also good night to Paula McDonald. And we're going to be muting that. Man, look at that tank. Looks like a T-80. It is a T-80. It's a T-80 BV. We see the drone getting in close. It's trying to get into the gunner's hatch here. And, oh, perfect. And we got a rave. Hey, let's get it, baby. Love it. That's just a beautiful. That's the end of the clip from the Atom Tactical Group. But they got that thing as a hole-in-one. Tiger Woods was even impressed with that one. And I heard that what's his name, Matthew? That Daly fella, what's his name? It's something Daly.
That golfer fella, I think it's John Daly.
Yeah, John Daly. Even John Daly stopped drinking and smoking after he saw that and decided to really up his game and really start to train heavily because that was truly the best you could see. Moving on from that.
I heard he gave up golf and moved on to the Mall Santa routine.
Dude, you had to do him dirty like that? Like, dang.
Oh, ho, ho.
Man. John
What's
Daly.
nothing wrong being Mall Santa?
Man,
what, you putting him down or something?
Dude, I heard John Daly saying ho, 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 and he wasn't a Mall Santa. He was just hanging out at a hotel at one point. But anyways, moving on from that, in Vegas of all places, it was kind of weird. You would think he wouldn't say that there. But anyways, moving on from that into the next clip, we also got to see some Ukrainian armor personnel carriers once again moving forward towards the Crimea forest with an interesting assortment. We got to see a YPR 765 from the Netherlands and follow closely behind by a Russian-captured BMP-3. Arr, that be some fine Peruvian blow, my boy. And look at that BMP-3.
Oh, yeah, pirates, they're coming through. They're going to take your booty.
Now, I got to tell you this. These markings on that BMP-3 right there, I got to admit, when the cross started off and it was just a cross, it's like, oh, that's just a cross. But when you start moving it into that, it really does kind of start to look a little bit like, geschlickt bei Leitman in den deutschen Volk, but, regardless.
Man, they're just playing into the, the Russians, they want to call them stuff. Well, they're going to play them, I guess.
Man, the Russians are getting played like a damn fiddle.
like a recorder with a 5th grade student.
Man, this armored convoy right here, it started off with "Arr, life on the open seas," and then "Geschlickt bei Leitman in den deutschen Volk," and then it moves on from that into "Arr, life on the open seas." And then another BP-3. Well, with that, that's the end of the clip. And I gotta say, not a bad little consist for an armored column moving into the Crimea forest. We also got to see some interesting clips of Leopard 1A5s in the Crimea area today. And we can actually see pictures of this. This appears to be taken from the turret of a Leopard. We can also see one in front of it. And then the next picture, we can see, once again, it appears to be from the gunner's cupola, because the turret is actually turned backwards as they continue to drive through the forest area. Very interesting to see, and it is showing that these Leopard 1A5s are not just trophy tanks that the Ukrainians are going to use on training fields. These are already being put well on into frontline service in areas near Avdiivka, and also kind of in the Bakhmut area on the very south, and also way up in the northeastern area near the Kharkiv Oblast. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see the 12th Azov in the trees. And we all love to see the 12th Azov in the trees because we know stuff's going down. It's a little bit of a lengthy clip, but it's a very interesting one nevertheless. Alright, well, that started out a little bit louder than I thought. We can see them firing and advancing. We now see darkness. Kind of like my inner soul. Wow, really twisted and deep. But anyways, you see them moving through the trenches under their camo nets. And we see here the Azov hanging out in the trench. It appears that this is the lull in between battles, or more so firefights that are a part of this massive battle in the woods. And I gotta say, man, woods in Ukraine are so bizarre looking. Like, there's no underbrush or anything. It's just trees, and that's it. And some grass.
Yeah, it's really sparse. Like, even here it is.
Yeah. Like, down here in the south, when you go into the woods, there's usually a lot of bushes and thickets and all kinds of stuff like that. You don't really see that in these forests. Now, a lot of people are probably going to say, well, that's because it's been shelled into oblivion. But there's not really a lot of crater marks in this area, and there's still green grass, showing that the ground hasn't been disturbed by mortar fire or artillery fire. And so it just appears that Ukrainian forests kind of look like this, at least a Crimea forest does. And apparently there's something 40 meters in front of them. Possibly Russians. I have a feeling it's Russians. 40 meters for my American viewers is approximately 120 to 140 feet. You see them all getting lined up along this embankment here. And did you ever notice, said in the live chat, you sound like a PBS pledge driver with your thanks for support. Wow, you actually got that right on the money. Because that's actually what we joke about. I actually know that I sound kind of like that, but we've thanked so many people. And this has been going on for 2 years. I've almost run out of ways to think of new and creative ideas of how to say thanks. Because I always want y'all to know that we are greatly appreciative of support, but I don't really know how to say that in many different ways. So we do kind of end up sounding like a PBS pledge driver, and we know that entirely. So you got that right on. And we can now see them firing what appears to be AT-4s directly at the Russian position 40 meters in front of them. And we now see more Ukrainian infantry moving out with an RPG as the next AT-4 is fired right in front of them. Dunk. Dunk.
Oh, come on, man. You were on camera. You could at least leaped over that log. You didn't have to do all that.
Man, real soldiers don't jump over logs.
Definitely don't crawl under it, though. That's bad luck.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Like, no doubt at all. I wouldn't deny that.
Man, you're over there enjoying that bun. I can hear it from here.
Yeah, dude. Dude, these things are amazing, man. This is going to be the only one on the stream, though, because it's honestly kind of distracting. But you see the next.
It makes you salivate too much. Like I was over here, like I had one just a second ago. Like somebody noticed, and I was like, "Damn!" I was like, "It's making me like literally like drool over this bonbon over here."
They're
just
so freaking good. Yeah, they're way too good. They're way too good. It's literally like crack. That's what it's like, these things. They're crazily good.
Whoa.
Not that I've had crack, but there are some people out there who run YouTube channels that can tell you about it. But anyways, we can see them firing a machine gun. Is that an ACOG? And we can see an
It
RPG
could be.
here.
Kind of looks familiar.
Now getting ready to fire it. And also, oh, no way. Now, I have to say this. This viewer knows who they are because we just went shooting the other day. And it was incredibly fun. And thank you so much for sharing that. That looks a lot like the Finnish AR. And I'm not, am I mistaken in saying that? Because it looks a lot like it. Let me know in the live chat. And they're laying down the heat. I mean, they're putting it down on these Spetsnaz fellows. I'm telling you that. They're continuing to fire.
GW North said, I'm just waiting for Matt to mention torts. Well, now that you mentioned torts, if you want to discuss negligence, let me know.
You see, torts are what you get inside of a car. Or it's like the other important aspect beyond horsepower. It's torts. How much torts do your cars have? Mine has a pretty decent amount of torts. I mean, hell, it can actually pull some. You know what I mean? But I have to tell y'all that I think here in the modern day in America, we really do have to address all kinds of extreme groups. And I think horsepower is another one of them. It's a pretty extreme idea trying to put horses above everything else. I think we need to handle that situation. But
Hey, man, that's spicy, I'm telling you.
Oh, spicy. Trying to come up with new things to say rather than just the same old. But anyways.
Man, you're going wild.
Man, we wild.
You woke up and chose violence when you chose to bring up a new topic.
Well, you see them firing this little AR here?
Arg, and welcome to Morgan. Welcome.
Welcome, boy. Arr.
Man, this guy's ducking and weaving around this tree. Like, the Russians don't stand a chance trying to get him.
Man, this machine gunner here, he's just enjoying the time. Looks like some of these trees were just cut down. Like, look how clean the cuts were on some of them. We see them continuing to fire.
Also, I noticed the guy's using a suppressor, by the way. I think. Don't I see one?
Yes, you do. That is what the cool guys would call a can.
A can. I mean, I don't know. Like maybe at night I could see the point of using one, but since you're like firing right in the tree line, I'd probably like unscrew it if you had the option and just like fire normally. It seems like a waste, you know, in the middle of the day since they can see you right now and stuff.
Well, that's an interesting take, Matthew, but beyond that, it also costs a lot of coin for that can.
Costs a lot of coin, man, and also he's wearing it down quite a bit right now.
Man, by the end of this thing, all the baffles are gone. It's just worn through completely. But I mean, like, unlike in America,
he's about to have it. He's putting some rounds through that thing.
Unlike in America, though, where the suppressors are like $1,000 or more at least, over there in Ukraine, they're probably like $50 or something because, you know, there's no restrictions. Angry Penguin said, hide the flash. Yes. Yes. I think suppressors...
It actually wasn't, actually. I saw like a bunch of flames coming out the front of it just like literally 5 seconds ago. I was thinking that thing, I think, is overheating.
GW North said, the guy beside you appreciates a suppressor. I can tell you, I can attest to that. I do appreciate the suppressors, the silencers, whatever people want to call them. I appreciate them greatly. They just keep the noise down. Honestly, if it was up to me, I feel like, as a policies thing, I feel like suppressors really shouldn't be regulated as much as they are in the United States, because using suppressors would certainly make it a lot quieter at ranges and wouldn't make it so jarring to the nerves. Because sometimes when you go to indoor ranges and there are no suppressors, you come out of there feeling like you just came out of battle because the noise was so loud. Like, you feel like you're at Marinka or something like that because your nerves are fried, your ears are rattled, even wearing hearing protection. It's just so loud. It's almost impossible to bear for any long amounts of time.
You know, I gotta say, hot take, but suppressors is probably one of the few things that they should actually regulate very closely. Because, like, after I got mine and realized, wow, this honey badger is like dead quiet with that suppressor on the end of it. I was thinking, I would hate if a nut was able to get their hands on one of these real easy, because that person could go around causing hell and nobody would even know where the bullets came from because it's that quiet.
Interesting. I look at it from a range perspective. I'm like, I just want the range to be quiet. That's all. Tim Morgan said, I thought silencers were outlawed.
I was about to say that too.
No, they're not outlawed. You just have to pay a $200 tax stamp and go through like an 8-month-long background check to be able to get one. But they're not outlawed. And machine guns aren't either. You also have to get a tax stamp for those, and they have to be made before 1986, I believe, to be transferable. But if you have like tens of thousands of dollars and 8 months of time and another $200 to throw down on a tax stamp, you too can own a machine gun.
It took me 12 months. They were really looking at me closely. They were like, well, we need to spend a few extra months on this Matt guy.
They sat there and looked into the future and said, he's going to work on a YouTube channel. Check him. Kind of like when we flew to Britain and back, Matthew, and every single time, all of y'all were good. And then they were like, hold up, sir. You have been selected for inspection at check. And I'm like, what the hell? I'm like 16 years old. Why am I the one being considered a security risk? What's going on here? But anyways, we see him still laying down the heat. And thank you so much, Butchie777. We saw that. Dankeschön. We see the machine gunner still laying down the heat. I mean, this video is intense. Let's see if there's music. Yep, there is. They got the Doomslayer music playing, so we'll have to keep it muted still. And Tim Morgan said, and I would if I was in the U.S., because you can. And where are you from, Tim? Because if I remember correctly, I think you're from the UK. But remind me, just to make sure, because I believe over in the UK, suppressors are actually required in some local municipalities due to noise ordinances. But I'm not entirely sure about that. Dude, imagine that. Imagine being told by the government you had to get a suppressor. Now, that's crazy.
If we were forced to get a suppressor, I wouldn't be objecting.
I wouldn't complain. Now, if that was a mandatory requirement, I'd be like, hey, I can't complain about that. Especially if, you know, they're affordable suppressors, not like $1,000 a piece. And they are still laying down the heat. They've put down a massive amount of firepower on these Russian forces a little bit further down the tree line.
Oh man, somebody's in here snitching on themselves. Y'all don't snitch like that in this live chat, please. Goodness
Gracious, y'all. Just calm down. Don't do it. And Tim is in the UK, so I did remember that correctly. Yeah, I think some of the police, well, not the police, but municipalities in the UK do require you to have a suppressor to be able to shoot within the area. Which I think is a great thing, because it just cuts down on the noise. Oh, and that suppressor is having a rough time. It's smoking.
Oh dear. I hear sirens converging around my room. What is going on?
Sirens?
Yeah, I don't know what's going
like
on.
Police
like
sirens
flying around everywhere else. Yeah.
Dude, you're sitting there covering the news. Meanwhile, outside, you're not taking me alive. It's like, oh, dude, wait a minute. That's down real south in Alabama, isn't it? It's like on the coast.
Yeah, in Mobile, man, around the outskirts of Mobile.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
You see your boy Matt peering out a hotel window in the background of a news story shot, talking about, over here on the left, young Timmy was killed today. It might have me peering out the window going, oh, what's happening?
Dude, you're going to be looking at it. Dude, the guy's in the bottom of the hotel right now in the lobby sitting there. You're not taking me alive. And they're down there. Come out with your hands up. Do not fight us. Stop resisting. And he's real. You're just covering the news. Anyways, moving on from that and on into the area of Luhansk, we got to see that some Russian soldiers that are still wounded that were treated for a short while in the hospital were left out at a freezing cold bus stop alone to try and get a bus to Rostov for further treatment on their own. All this is not covered by the Russian army. They dumped us to wait for the Rostov bus. No light, no heating, F all. We got sick. Both of us had a surgery recently. F all, no food, no water. They told us to stay here for 3 to 4 days before being picked up. Here's where we sleep and warm up. Our first night, we're already in awe. Really cold. So these are our conditions. Some abandoned village. In Luhansk or whatever. We were brought from hospitals. We have rats. It says the rat. We have rats. Says the biggest rat in the room, the Russian. No water, no food, nothing. And with that, that's the end of the clip right there, but showing some Russians that are not having the best of times, like all of them are. Moving on from that into the area of Bakhmut, we did get to see, well, actually, we already covered the Bakhmut area. Whoops! Moving on from that and down to the area of Novobakhmut-Kievka, we got to see that an important power transformer was destroyed by the Ukrainians, which is going to leave some Russians without electricity in their trenches. Svidla ne bude. Neil Vizanon said, sorry about the airport, but all 16-year-olds are clinically stupid. Dang, man, you gonna put me down like that? You're saying when I was 16, I was stupid? I'll have you know.
Where's the airport tie-in, though?
Yeah, it's like, man, all 16-year-olds are suspect. But we see the drone fly right into the power transformer, blowing it up. Reminds me of that time I stuck a fork into one of the electrical sockets, but it knocked out the power, and they're not going to be having any electricity for days until that's repaired. We're now moving on from that and into our next clip, because I just realized the time, and we still have a decent amount of news to cover all the way down to Kherson. But moving on to our next clip, we did get to see a Bradley hitting some Russian forces. We're going to be viewing that. There's the Bradley. Here's the Russians. Here comes the Bradley. It now stops, and it's going to fire. And then it starts rolling forward a little bit more, and then it stops, and it gets ready to fire. And then it rolls forward, and then it stops. And now it starts firing. And look at the Ukrainians. They are shredding these Russians like paper that has tax returns on them. Don't ask some people about... Oh, wait a minute. There's a Russian APC on the run. It's getting beaten up by this Bradley, and it's getting cluster bombed at the same time. Oh, man. That crew's having a bad day.
It's like an electrical storm happening on top of it. The little lights dancing around.
That's the end of that clip. But hey, Matthew, I got to tell you this. That crew, they just got a light show, and it's not the one they want. Moving on from that and into our next clip.
Fry them up.
That's it. Moving on into our next clip. We got to see the 10th Brigade. Oh, we won't be able to show that one, apparently. But moving on into our next one, your Star Mikhailov.
Spicy.
Man, that one was spicy like Tabasco. But moving on from that, we got to see that the 79th Brigade was hitting Russian forces in the area of Staromanivka. And so, here's the clip. Muting the rock music, we can see the explosion. We can see more artillery shells landing around. We see them dropping some drone bomblets, which that Russian...
Oh, he heard it coming.
Actually dodged. But you see a Russian down there napping. It looks like he won't be napping well.
He kept napping, actually. I think he was napping already pretty good.
The way you said that, Matthew, you went, oh. I was like, whoa. Oh, dude, he crawling? We got an MTLB, T-72, no, a T-80 of some kind, a T-72B3, another T-72B3, a running Russian, and that drone's speeding up on him, and that Russian's going, oh, bleh! And he's crawling. Oh, he be crawling. And they be dropping. Ooh. And that's the end of the clip. But with that, we're now going to be moving on from that little clip and on to our next one, where we also got to see a little bit further down the lines, and near Volodymyrivka, the 72nd was hitting some Russian forces down here. Hey, right down here. Check it out, will ya? It largely ended up destroying a very high amount of Russian artillery that was operated by some of the units in this area. For example, this peon.
Those peons are always getting the short end of the stick.
Man, those peons are always getting peed on by the Ukrainians. it's always and forever. But that's the end of the clip.
Like Mike Tyson said, I'll piss on you.
Man, I thought you was a nice guy, man, but you really just a rat piece of shit, man. Oh, come on, Mike. Nah, man. Wait, I can't say that. Oh, whoa. Hey, we got to keep it civil around here. This is a war. This is family friendly. Anyways, we can see a FPV drone flying into a Russian APC. Actually, an SPG. It's a 2S1. Ooh! Just had to make sure that some of y'all turned down the volume really quickly. We can see it flying in again, hitting another 2S1. And a puff of white smoke. A good sign. And with that,
yeah, somebody said R. Kelly on the Russians. They're wild for that.
Ooh, just pulling R. Kelly on him. Oh, wait a minute. But anyways, moving on from that.
Wait a minute. You remember that Dave Chappelle skit? He was like talking about R. Kelly and did that little skit, and he was singing along and said, I'm gonna piss on you.
Yeah, he said there, ooh, I'm gonna piss on you. Or something like that. It was like,
that was so funny.
Dude, honestly, man, that was wild, but that was really funny. But moving on from that, we did get to see an explosion in a concrete plant in Mariupol. If y'all can't tell, the exhaustion has gotten to us at this point. We were just wild in here, but I hope y'all are enjoying it because I feel like it's more entertaining probably for y'all than us just, humdrum covering news. But here's the explosion of the concrete plant. Exact information is not known about the extent of the damage on the plant, but they have been able to say that the damage was apparently quite significant and was described as concrete. Moving on from that little bit of news and out of the area of Mariupol, it's now time for us to get on into the area of Robotine, where we got to see that the Russians are once again using Ukrainian soldiers that have been captured in this area as bait to try and draw out Ukrainian sniper fire. We can actually see this through the scope of a Ukrainian sniper that filmed proof of this. When you see them spotting the Ukrainian soldier that's been forced to stand where his head's exposed, so that way he'll draw some Ukrainian sniper fire. And we see the Russian over there with a rifle, who's going to kill the guy if he tries to back away and not be up here as a target.
Man, that'd be a tough spot to be put in because, what if the Ukrainian sniper caps you anyway, or you could have fought to the death with the Russians? That's a tough choice.
It's a very tough choice, for sure. And once again, showing that the Russians are committing war crimes on almost a hourly basis at this point in that part of the front line. Moving on from that bit of news and into our next one, we did get to see that vengeance is sweet as another Russian APC ran over a landmine in the area that ended up taking out almost everyone riding on board. Here's the clip. We can see our little BMP of the day. It's about to get its scout's honor. Here it goes. Poof! And it's gone. Taking a good amount of Russians with it. Oh! Beautiful. It's like a light show. With that, that's the end of that clip, and we're now moving on to our next one outside the area of Robotny, where we're now moving on down into Kherson. We got a clip today showing a Russian BMD-4 burning in the area, showing once again that the next counterattack today has once again failed, and the Russians have not been able to break the Ukrainian forces that are currently holding the city or village of Krenki. The ammunition is also burning very vibrantly in this one. It's throwing out hints of white, yellow, and orange, making sure to show us the hot weather and colors of summer, although summer is so far away for many Russians in Ukraine, they can still dream as they watch their armored personnel carriers burn to the ground. And with that, that's the end of the clip right there, and we're now going to be moving on from that little bit of news and on into our next bit. But before we do, really quickly, I have to say this. Someone said, and I just have to address this really quickly, everyone, because don't know if people just like to have problems or what, but we want to clarify this just to make this very clear. Someone said, I've been watching your stream since the beginning of the war, and my son is active duty 101st and just returned from deployment in Romania. You should do your research before, and probably before you say something, and probably talking about the poll earlier, or we said, what is your favorite airborne unit? That's an opinion, you see, and we did our research because we know that the 101st is in Romania, and we also mentioned that as well at some point in the stream. I guess you're watching very early on while we're here in the present, you're watching in the past, but it is an opinion and it's a question. Just because your son serves in the 101st does not mean that that has to be my favorite airborne unit, much like, you know, just because you drive a Tacoma, that doesn't mean that has to be my favorite car. So just wanted to clarify that really quickly because, you know, what research is there? It's a subjective question of opinion, so I don't even know what the problem is there, but...
Well, somebody told me the poll was biased earlier, and it literally said, what is your favorite airborne unit? It's a question. How can a question be biased? That's simple.
Yeah, it's not like we leaded y'all into an answer. Y'all could pick any of the 4 options you wanted. You could pick the 101st, the 82nd, the British Paras, or the Fallschirmjäger. So out of the 4 of them, you pick, and, you know, that is what it is. I mean, you know, if you don't like opinions... I hate to tell you, there's a lot of people have a lot of opinions. I do too, and I honestly like the 82nd Airborne over the 101st. You know, and that's just my opinion. I just think the 82nd's a neat airborne brigade, and it's my favorite. So, you know, I hate to tell you that, but, you know, that is what it is. But moving on from that, we did get to see that the British Ministry of Defense put out a report a week and a half after we gave it to y'all. Many of y'all may remember that we started to tell y'all that due to the heavy presence of BMD armored personnel carriers in the area of Krenki, that we assumed that the brand new brigade that had been raised by the Russians as a part of the VDV had finally been deployed and brought into the area of Kherson to try and crush the Ukrainian forces inside of Krenki. The British Ministry of Defense was able to back us up in that statement today, now confirming that the 104th Guards Airborne Division, which is the new, the new division level unit that was raised in the VDV, now it has 5 divisions instead of the prior 4, has suffered high losses because it's been deployed in Krenki. We said that a week and a half ago, and now the British Ministry of Defense is finally getting around to saying it itself because they were able to do the research that we were able to do so quickly. We were covering it live on air. Now, I don't mean, you know, I'm not trying to discredit the British Ministry of Defense or their intelligence abilities, but I just want y'all to know and see, and once again with proof, that when y'all hear news on this channel, we are usually well ahead of everyone else. Honestly, we are so ahead most of the time, and now I sound like someone else, Matthew. We're so ahead, we're the greatest. But we're so ahead most of the time that usually y'all come in here and ask us about a news topic that we had already covered the day before, or 2 days before, and it's finally making it into mainstream news, or larger groups are covering it, like the British Ministry of Defense. But I wanted to make sure to just cover this and show this to y'all that the British Ministry of Defense is confirming the very thing that we said a week and a half ago. It's always important for us to know that we are making sure to cover the news accurately. And this is confirming that what we were saying a week and a half ago was completely accurate and is now corroborated by the British Ministry of Defense itself. Either they're watching our show or they're doing a whole lot of deliberation and research before they make a statement. And that's why it takes them a week and a half. But moving on from that little bit of news, it's now time for us to move on into the area of Odessa, where we got to hear that the air defense in this area was able to shoot down 40 drones overnight. Here's a clip from the air defense. Ooh, get him! And with that, that's the end of the clip right there. Absolutely wonderful to see, and good to know that the Ukrainian air defense was successful. With that, we're now going to be moving on to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky, because he did make one today, and it was pretty baller. Here's the clip. Or more so, the peach. Peach!
Speech!
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці, шановні українки. Важливий день, тиждень, важливі були візити. Багато зустрічей і перемовин, ще більше непублічної роботи із друзями, і зі скептиками, також з усіма. Україна завжди захищає себе, здобуває те, що потрібно. І навіть тоді, коли хтось сумнівається, ми не здаємось, а переконуємо і боремось. Борітеся, поборете. Саме так це працює і дійсно дуже сильний результат і для України, для всієї Європи. Ще один крок до свого повноправного членства України в ЄС. Я дякую всім, хто підтримав, виконав саме те, про що ми домовлялись. Дякую всім в Україні, нашій команді, хто зробив все необхідне. Рекомендації Єврокомісії ми виконали, сумніви ми зняли. Сьогодні рішення про початок переговорів про вступ в ЄС. Після цього кроку ще будуть наступні. Велика робота. Інтегрувати державу, всі інституції, всі норми, все це до Євросоюзу. Але зробимо. Україна вже не раз доводила, на що ми здатні. Буде інше переможне рішення. Буде час, коли зможемо відсвяткувати вступ України в ЄС. А зараз в Україні багатьох піднесений настрій. І це важливо, це мотивація. Я вітаю всіх вас, кожного і кожного, з тим, що вдалося. Вдалося усім нам, хто єдністю України зміцнює єдність Європи. Я хочу особливо подякувати усім хлопцям і дівчатам, чоловікам, жінкам, які бились, б'ються заради України, які зараз в боях захищають волю України, які допомагають нашим воїнам, лікують, тренують, завозять зброю, вироблюють зброю. Усе, чого ми досягаємо, було б неможливо без тієї героїчної сміливості наших людей, нашого народу, яка так надихає весь світ, всіх нас. Я повернувся в Україну, зараз у Львові, з рішенням щодо Євросоюзу і іншими речами, які посилять ППО. Пакетів підтримки теж буде більше. Був хороший саміт з північними країнами. Наші друзі, я дякую вам за підтримку. Сильні рішення. Данія пакет на $1 мільярд для захисту неба, артилерія, багато чого ще. Норвегія новий пакет, більше $400 мільйонів, зокрема ППО. Фінляндія теж готує новий пакет. Ісландія готує програму довготривалої фінансової підтримки, дуже вагому. Швеція теж новий пакет. Є сильна заява саміту Україна плюс Північна Європа. Ще один політичний снаряд, який наближає нашу перемогу. Візит в Аргентину фактично. Перезапускаємо відносини з усім регіоном Латинської Америки. Дякую, що почув чіткі слова підтримки і, звичайно, Сполучені Штати. Сьогодні я був на базі у Вісбадені, у Німеччині. Там розташовано командування військ США в Європі та Африці. Потужно. Там наші хлопці, військові працюють. Звичайно, були зустрічі з партнерами, які нас посилять. І візит у Вашингтон. Президент Байден, його команда, міністр Остін, генерал Браун, Конгрес, обидві палати, обидві партії. Спікер Джонсон, я чув слова поваги до нашого народу, до нашої боротьби, важливі поради, важливі домовленості. Я дякую всім за підтримку, продовжимо нашу роботу. Очікую, що Конгрес найближчим часом ухвалить необхідне рішення. Ми маємо перемогти. Що б не відбулося, ми працюємо, б'ємось та збільшуємо силу нашої прекрасної України. Вірте в свої сили. Слава Україні!
And Slava. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky, and that begins the second part of this stream, where I get to talk to all of y'all for about the next 45 minutes or so. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, so moving into our last poll and question segment, our first poll says, do you think an EU Central Supreme Court is a good thing or a bad thing for Ukraine to have to basically assent to? It looks like 41% said it's a good thing, 27% said unsure, 20% said it's a bad thing, and 12% said, it seems trivial. And to me, it seems like that would usurp the state's power, meaning Ukraine's power, because I'm sure Ukraine already has a pretty tiered and hierarchical court system. and it seems like an EU central court would kind of sort of weaken their national power. But that's just my opinion on the matter. And also, I don't know too much about the central EU court, so I'm speaking on very limited knowledge. But if anyone has anything extra to add that could help us with that or help me with that, that would be very interesting to hear. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I'm going to have to withhold comment because it's, for many Europeans, an actual political issue. So I'm going to have to withhold comment on that and make sure that I don't address it to keep clear of politics. And so that we are on to the next one.
And our next poll says the U.S. is assembling a naval task force to combat the Houthi threat in the Red Sea. And is this good? 62% said yes, that is strong enough and great. 17% said no, that's too weak. We should bomb them instead. 12% said, that works, but meh. And 8% said unsure. And on this one, I gotta say that works, but it's meh. Because we already had U.S. ships in the Red Sea. They were already there, ready to respond. And rather than sounding good and sounding like we're taking a very strong approach to combat the Houthis, all we're really doing is we're adding a couple ships to our flotilla, which was already there. So not really much of a real change in reality. But I guess it sends a message that we're taking it seriously if you want to look at it that way. But to me, it seems like the only way to really respond proportionally would be to bomb the Houthis in Yemen. But we're not going to do that. That's pretty evident at this point. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say, I think it's a good move. It's a step in the right direction, but I think we could do a little bit more instead of just having a naval coalition that is going to try and deal with Houthi pirates. I think it would be better to actually have direct action occur against the Houthis on land through airstrikes or something similar. So I'd have to agree. It's good, but it's also a little mad. I think we could go a little bit further because we've been on that page for a while. And that's something that I got to say real quick. We always are pretty good with that. Telling y'all what we would do from the outset, and we've already told y'all that, I've already told you that I think it would be a prudent move to conduct airstrikes on the Houthi-controlled areas in Yemen, or to support a coalition to crush the Houthi-controlled part of Yemen. Either one of those would do. And considering that this is moving in that direction, I think it's good, but I think there could be more. And so with that, hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And also, for some reason, I don't know why, I'm looking out my window and the police are literally circling around the hotel. I don't have any clue why that's happening. There's always something strange happening whenever I go somewhere. But anyways, up next,
Dude, you're like that guy,
you're
like that guy, Matthew, with the pizza review, you know, where he's sitting out there and he's like, all right, I'm here with a pizza review, and someone goes, you know what you should do? You should give the pizza to the crack addicts. And then he like walks off and he's like, how is he carrying that? Like, you know, that video I'm talking about.
Johnny, what the hell's going on out here, Johnny? What? Yeah. I mean, come on, can I catch a break?
Like, he tries to eat a pizza and there's like a carjacking behind him, and then they like you veer off with the car and there's a whole high-speed chase and everything.
Yeah, it's always weird, but yeah, I just looked out the window and there's like two Mobile like police officers just roaming around the hotel, like in their cars, just circling around the building. I'm like, what the hell? Why did we have to pick a hotel where something's going down? But anyways, with that being said, we're actually moving on to the Super Chat questions this time. And the first one is going to go to Butchie777, who puts in a $100 donation.
Dang!
And huge shout out to Butchie for that very generous support. And Butchie says, for the Bonbon Fund, and Christmas is always a busy time for me in the workshop making knives. And yesterday was a good day, and I just wanted to share some respect for what you guys do. And my morning coffee always tastes better with LSA juice.
And thank you so much for the massive amount of support, Butchie777, one of our British viewers of the Lee Spring Army. And I gotta thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support, helping this channel to keep on running. And not only that, throwing in such kind words. It means a lot to us to hear that you enjoy the LSA juice, and I hope that we get to provide the juice well. As many of y'all can tell, and I've got to thank all of y'all once again for the massive support tonight. The support has been absolutely incredible yesterday and tonight, and we are so greatly appreciative to y'all. Y'all help us out greatly in many ways with y'all support. But one thing that I'm sure many of y'all have seen is that our viewership on this stream has been curbed just over the past 3 days. It went from being around 5,000 viewers, 5.2 thousand viewers at the peak, to now we are hardly able to break 4,000 viewers a day because YouTube is not promoting us like they used to. And that is something that we can actually back up with statistics. We can see that YouTube just puts out far less impressions for our show now than they did about a week or two ago. And it's a little bit aggravating to us, but regardless of that, the channel didn't start out as a big channel, and it didn't really start out with the idea that it'd even blow up. And I always have to remember that, because doing this for 2 years, we get used to knowing that there will be a certain amount of viewers on and seeing certain people here. But at the beginning, it always wasn't like that. It was never like that. We just had nobody around. I mean, literally there was like maybe like 100 or 1,000 people that watched all of the streams day by day up until day 4, and then we got like 80,000 views in one night. And so it doesn't matter how many viewers we have. It just matters if y'all are enjoying the news we're covering, the folks that are here. And I gotta thank every single one of y'all for always enjoying it, hitting the like button somehow, even with our viewership half from what it was about a week ago. We still reached 2,000 likes, and the stream isn't even over yet. And I gotta say, thank you so much to folks like you, Butchie777, for your support and helping this thing to keep on rolling. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible, and we wouldn't be able to get the news out to all of y'all who enjoy it and support it like y'all have. And so thank you so much once again. And I thank you so much for supporting the Bonbon Fund, because those freaking things are addictive. They're like crack. During Zelensky's speech, I went up and grabbed another, because it's like, man, I just got to have another. I got to have another. But with that, thank you so much once again. And thank you for enjoying this show with your morning coffee. And I hope that you have a fun time at work. Hopefully work is fun. And also, we will take a live Geschlecht by Leichman. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and our regular live chat question is going to go to Tim Morgan, who says, knowing the Enforcer has a thing with helmets, has you guys seen the new rifle-rated helmet? I forgot the manufacturer, but sorry.
And first off, could you reread that one again?
Tim said, knowing the Enforcer has a thing with helmets, has you guys seen the new rifle-rated helmet? I forget the manufacturer, but sorry.
And I've got to thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running and addressing that little interesting question. I have heard about helmets that apparently are rated level 4, but I haven't really seen that much about them, and also I think they're exorbitantly expensive right now. If we can ever get our hands on one, we are going to try and review it, but for now, most helmets are usually around level 3A or level 3 plus. Usually. That's usually what they're around. But level 4, we do know that some U.S. forces have been equipped with them, actually. I think the U.S. is one of the few armed forces in the world at the moment that do have level 4 helmets for some of their infantry units, but I haven't really seen a lot about it. But with that, thank you so much once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on rolling and addressing that live chat, because folks like you supporting this channel have helped us to make this thing possible. Even while people who wish bad things upon us are here in our chat right now because they just can't stop. It's just insane. But with that, we are on to the next one. Hello?
Sorry. Okay, moving on to the... wait a minute.
Oh, wait a minute. Now I see. Now I see. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was trying to hold it in. But anyways, moving on to our next one. While I was muted, I was dying and trying not to be loud while I was laughing. Snow White puts in a $50 donation. And thank you very much, Snow White, for that support. That is extremely generous of you. And sorry about the laughing. I'm trying to hold it together. But thank you very much for helping to get the channel running. And Snow White says, for the Bullet Fund.
And thank you so much for the Bullet Fund, Snow White, and helping this channel to keep rolling. We are going to put it towards bullets. The gun reviews are going to be coming soon. Hopefully, we're going to have some out. I think, Matthew, honestly, we're going to have to get into a very intense filming schedule here with the gun reviews to make sure that we have enough stuff to edit so that way we can keep having gun reviews rolling out through the next semester of law school, hopefully. We don't know how that's going to work at this point. We're going to have to, play that by ear and figure it out. And also, we're going to have to get the final exam grades to figure out how good we did and if we need to study more or less. Because while we've completely forgotten about that now, every once in a while I think about that during the break, and I'm like, I'm dreading the day we get our grades back, because I know I got
my first one back.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a B for illegal reasoning. B plus.
Yeah, we both got that back. I made a C. I was like, damn. It's like,
oh, for real?
Well, yeah. Remember, I told you that like 3 times now. All fair. Like, I made.
I thought you said you made it like that on the memo or something.
No, I made that on the actual one. Matthew, you've known that.
Oh, no, it's all right. It's all right.
But anyways, with that, well, Matthew, actually, he's surprised about something I've told him at least 3 times at this point. I made a C on one of my classes, pretty much. A C plus, probably, once it averages out. But we'll have to wait and see what the other grades look like, because if they're not good, probably going to have to start prioritizing trying to study for law school. I don't know how that's going to work. Because I tried to prioritize studying, but it was almost impossible with how things worked, because I'd pretty much get home from law school, and as soon as I got home, I had to start working on this. So don't know how that's going to work, but we're going to figure out a way if it didn't go well. If it went well, then I'm just going to keep doing what we did last semester, but if it didn't, I'm going to have to try and figure out something new. But with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And you know what they say, folks? The C students are the ones that the A students are working for. That's what they're selling us on, and that's what I'm banking on. But anyways, moving on to our next Super Chat question, we have a $50 donation from Tom J. Oatley. And he got very bored earlier when I started talking that legalese talk. And to be honest with you, I can't blame Tom at all, actually,
No,
for
I
that, because it does
can't.
get boring sometimes. So, but thank you very much, Tom, for that very generous support. And he says, when out on rifle range, if you can, try out Croatian VHS rifle.
You know,
And that's that tape rifle, I'm telling you.
and you know something, Tom? We actually kind of had one for a little bit, because the import version of the VHS rifle is the Springfield Hellion, and it's just really souped up looking. It's like plastified is the best way I could describe it. But this is the rifle he's talking about. That's the Croatian VHS-2, designed to use a NATO 5.56 cartridge. And this is what the import variant looks like that's imported by Springfield Armory, which is called the Springfield Hellion. I've got to be honest with y'all, this thing sucked. It was terrible. I actually ended up getting rid of it, and I just completely threw away the idea of ever doing a review on this thing. The ejection system never worked. The rounds would never eject. Sometimes the extractor never worked. The bolt never really held on to the rounds too well, because even if the ejector wasn't working, most of the time, the bolt wouldn't even hold on to the actual cartridge itself for it to eject. It would just keep the expended cartridge in the chamber and then try and chamber another round on top of it, creating a very difficult jam to try and unfix. It just had a load of problems, mine did, and nothing got better. Somehow, I followed the manual to a T to convert this thing from a right side firing rifle to a left side firing rifle, and then somehow, some way, I found out that the firing pin ended up getting bent, although I followed the manual to a T. So out of everything, I don't really like this thing. It just wasn't that good. I wasn't that big of a fan of it. And on top of that, the trigger pull was really clanky. Like, you sat there and pulled the trigger back and pulled it back and back and back, and it just never fired. Like, you had to pull that thing back like an inch and a half for it to finally fire. And even then, the trigger was kind of sticky feeling. I just wasn't a big fan of it. And I heard so many good things about this thing, and that's why we ended up getting one to try and review in the future, because I was like, if it's supposedly good, maybe this is going to be our introduction to bullpups and possibly reviewing them. But then it just wasn't. It just wasn't good at all. And it was lame. Like, honestly, after that, I wasn't really that big of a fan of bullpups. And then after more experience with the AUG smacking me in the face with the cartridge, I was like, you know what? I think bullpups aren't for me. One bullpup I will say, though, is good, is the P90. That's technically a bullpup design. A very good one, but beyond the P90, I'm just not seeing any out there that really make me happy, where I'm like, oh, I like that a pretty good deal. But with that, hope that does address that well. And thank you so much, Tom, once again for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Sarge, for that support. He says, LSA Soldier, happy 7th night of Hanukkah. And hit that like button now, and let's see how high as we can get it tonight. And did you see that the U.S. passed a bill stating that Ukraine military support will continue through 2027, and that's great news.
And that is amazing news. Hopefully they can actually get down some cemented plans on what that support is going to entail. We hope that will happen soon, because at the moment I don't think that's happened yet. But to address the rest of it, and let me make sure I grab it. Let me make sure. Dang. 1 second. Let me make sure. And also, LSA, happy 7th night of Hanukkah to all of our Jewish viewers. I hope you all are having a great time with Hanukkah. And I also hope that everyone else is having a great time with whatever form of Christmas y'all are celebrating. Although some people are going to say, there are not other forms of Christmas, there are other holidays together. I'm just going to say other forms of Christmas because it's easier for me to say than listing off every holiday. But regardless, I want to thank you so much once again for support, LSA Sergeant Figment. Everyone make sure to hit the like button. We're up to 2007 likes, 2008 likes. And if those likes were a year, that means we just entered the economic recession of 2008 and Georgia just got invaded by Russia. Hey, what a year.
The 2007, that was a great year for everyone except for stockbrokers and pretty much everybody in the U.S.
Man, stockbrokers got put on a watch, but it wasn't a watch list like the FBI. It was another kind of watch that had to deal with the sides of sewers. But nevertheless, I hope that we can get it very high tonight because now the likes are 2012, which means that technically, according to, what was it, the Mayan calendar or something, the world was going to end in 2012. And now it's 2016, so Harambe just died. And let's see. Did you see the... And also, I addressed that part. So, yes, I did see it. And hopefully we will be able to get some final details on what that support will entail. Because hopefully it will be the massive support like we've been seeing over the past 2 years nearly. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to the Old Buzzard, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you, Mr. Old Buzzard, for that support. He says, I heard missiles are being shipped from D.C., but I'm not sure.
From Washington, D.C.?
That's what he says.
Maybe. I don't think there's any missile storage sites in Washington, D.C. I think you may be talking about Joint Base Andrews, or Andrews Air Force Base or something similar, but I don't know of any weapons facilities or sites that would be inside of Washington, D.C. itself. But I'll try and look into that a little bit and get some more information if I possibly can. But thank you so much once again for the support, Old Buzzard, and helping this channel to keep on running. Oh, you Old Buzzard. And you know what? I think there's a perfect neighborhood, Matthew, to describe the Lee Spring Army. Friendship Heights Village.
Friendship, the heights of friendship in the village.
Ah, yes. And then we have the complete opposite of that, Chevy Chase. That's when you don't put the parking brake on your Chevy and it just starts rolling down the hill. Chevy Chase. But anyways, with that, thank you so much once again for support, Old Buzzard. Hope that does address that well. And we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Plant Lady, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, Plant Lady, as well.
Hey!
And she says to support the channel, you guys are the best. And take a question from the chat in Slav Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support, Plant Lady, and helping this channel to keep on running. You have been around forever, and are you not only an old guard of this channel, but you're a channel legend as well. And I gotta thank you so much for being Our Lady of the Plants. Matthew, that almost sounds like one of those Catholic schools, you know, it's like Our Lady of the Lake or something like that, Our Lady of the Plants. But still, thank you so much for the support, help this channel to keep on running, and thank you for saying we are the best. I don't think we're the best. I think there are people out there who may give us a run for our money very easily, but you know, those are the guys who aren't on crack. And also, we will make sure to take a question from the chat. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew? And Matthew, before we do, I've heard that there is possibly some hot dogs for sale around here nearby.
Hot dogs for sale? No, we don't sell those here, but I know someone who does.
I know someone who does, and I know someone who may also help you out with your hot dog down at the bus station, if you know what I mean. But you know, we might see them pop up here again. They popped up twice. Even made a separate account to pop up here tonight. I'm honored. I really am. And once again, no mention of the psycho, but they just can't let it go. Sad, pitiful people.
What a bomb.
What a bum. What a bum indeed. And, you know...
Stay away from crack, kids. It does strange things to your brain. I've seen it firsthand.
Do stay away from crack. And also stay away from the barbers that carve like a giant circular hole in your hair on your scalp. Stay away from those too, because
oh man, that's foul.
they end up roughing you up pretty bad. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
And the live chat question goes to Michael Johnson, who says, if Ukraine gets into the EU, will Orban still be able to prevent aid?
No, I don't think. I think Orban may actually be changing the position. I think we may be seeing a slow shift in that after Zelensky talked to him in Buenos Aires, because Hungary has now greenlit the accession of Ukraine into any kind of a partnership with the European Union. And I think that's starting to show that Hungary may actually be having a tectonic shift in its foreign policy to Ukraine. If that's the case, and we were correct with that, I don't think that question will even matter going forward, because they may actually support Ukraine entirely beyond this point. But we'll have to wait and see. Going off of the idea, though, the hypothetical where Hungary does not continue to greenlight Ukraine, and this is a one-off instance, once Ukraine joins the European Union, it probably will still take the exact same process it's taking now. It will take the approval of other EU members to send support into Ukraine. But to be honest with you, I don't know how the European Union system works in approving aid. I don't know if it's like Congress here in the United States or if it's different, considering that the European Union Council is clearly different than the U.S. Congress in a couple of different ways. But with that, hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat question goes to JC Atkins, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much for that support. And he says, good evening, and I'm sorry I haven't been on a live in a while, but take a live chat on behalf of your favorite LSA Navy NCO.
Hey, and I knew it is our LSA NCO. And I got to thank you so much once again, JC Atkins, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And it is perfectly fine to not be here for a while. Folks are always busy, and I understand that completely. But we're always happy to have y'all here whenever y'all are able to get on the show. And I thank you for being here with us tonight, JC Atkins, and supporting this channel and helping us to keep it running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, it wouldn't be possible. And so thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one is a super chat from...
Actually, wait, we forgot to get the live chat from JC Atkins.
So the live chat from JC Atkins goes to Barry Woodward, who says, yes, and Barry says, seriously, I'm talking seriously here, come on, be serious. If World War III begins, will the U.S. be able to self-sustain? No commerce, internet, and formerly known comforts. No bonbons. What say you?
The U.S. would be able to sustain for a time, especially if we were able to make sure that Taiwan is defended. The computer industries will remain intact, and with the computer industries existing, I have a feeling that the United States can rapidly industrialize however it needs to fit the war economy that we would now be facing. I don't think that's just the case for America. I think that's also going to be the case for Europe as well. We probably would see some pretty quick resourcefulness from really everyone in the Western world to deal with that situation. So I don't think it will be that bad. I don't think it's going to be tough. Of course, things will get strained, much like they do in every war. There will probably be rationing of food items, stuff like that, maybe even electrical usage and internet access. But beyond that, things will carry on. It'll just be a little bit tougher for a short while, but hopefully would get better as time goes on, or by the time a ceasefire was negotiated. Because if there's no such thing as victory in World War III, there is a negotiated ceasefire or there is nuclear hellfire, one or the other. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And thank you so much for asking a very interesting question. And with that, we are now on to the next super chat.
All right, and the next super chat goes to Funhuer, who puts in a 20 and says, Enforcer, I can't wait to start seeing the Pew reviews, and maybe the man reality gets a better job soon, and gets some oddballs for you to enjoy as well, and love Ukraine.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I'm so happy to hear that you're excited for the gun reviews. We are looking forward to doing that so much. We've tried to get a whole bunch of interesting stuff lined up to shoot. I was able to find some really cool stuff. We actually were able to manage to get a Polish KBKG WZ-60 somehow that is able to be modified into its grenade launcher form and fire inert rounds. That means that it's completely within legal requirements, because, you know, if it was a live grenade, that would be a destructive device, which would be an issue. But we got an inert one, like they use in training. So we will be able to review that thing and show it to y'all on our video, and we cannot wait to do that. There's also a whole bunch of other stuff that we're able to line up as well. We were able to... And when I say get, I mean, like, we're kind of just lining up the ability to take this thing with us to a range and review it. But we were able to line up the ability to get a Browning 1919 medium machine gun firing 30-06, FAL firing full auto, an Uzi submachine gun. I hope LSA Sergeant Figman likes to hear that. And also a Sten gun and a whole bunch of others as well. Like, we are going to have a whole bunch of cool stuff to show y'all. AK-74s, P-90s, M14s, M16s, M4s, M1 Garens, 1903s, you name it, we have tried to find some way to be able to bring that onto the channel. So, you know, of course the list isn't extensive. I think we maybe have about 50 guns lined up for now, which will probably sustain us well throughout the first year of doing that if we did it every week. But once we get through those, we're probably going to start trying to look for cool and obscure rifles wherever they may be. But with that, hope that does address that well, and I thank you so much once again for the support and enjoying the future of this channel, because hopefully it'll be incredibly interesting. And of course, Slava Ukraini, and thank you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Tim Morgan, who puts in a $10 donation, along with Gilly Flower, who also puts in a 10, and they don't leave comments. But huge shout out to Tim and also Gilly as well for that support and helping to keep the channel running. And with that, we are moving on to our next one, which goes to LSA Sergeant Figment, who also puts in a 10 and says, yes, you were correct last night. The day I joined the IDF, my dad took me to Laterne Tank Museum and check it out on the map and check out the images.
And how is it spelled, Matthew? Laterne, like, how?
It's called Laturn.
Laturn. Ah, I see. Well, welcome to Birmingham, everyone. But anyways, Laturn Museum. Museum? Israel. Let's see here. Ah, yes. There we go. The War Museum. Is this it? I think this is it. This is it. There's the is that the Merkava? No, that's not the Merkava you were on. Yours was like a Mark II or something. Ah, yeah, it was this one. Or this one. Actually, I think it was probably this one, wasn't it? Because that is a Merkava Mark II for sure. And they even let you climb on these things. That is... Well, actually, he was sitting on the barrel, so I don't know why I'm surprised by that. But really cool. They have everything out here. How neat. I gotta say, that is so cool. That is really neat. And I thank you for sharing that with us. And this looks like one hell of a museum. Maybe, whenever we travel the world, or start traveling the world, which might not ever happen, maybe we'll get to go here and take a look at this museum, because it looks pretty freaking cool. And so with that, thank you so much for the support, LSA Sergeant Figment. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat is going to go to New Jersey, UFOs, secret space, and chemtrails. And they put in a $10 donation.
And
that's a lot.
Yeah, what a name.
They said, you guys rule, and just call small. Wait a minute. Just a call. What? Oh, wait a minute. Hold on. Let me try to get my brain around this. Just a call small. Thank you for your hard work this semester.
Dave. That's it in all caps. Dave. And thank you so much for the support. New Jersey, UFO, secret space chemtrails. You are actually a channel legend, but I haven't heard your name in such a long time. It was shocking to hear it again. And I got to thank you for being here for so long. I remember you being here pretty much ever since our first 2 weeks of running this stream. And also, thank you so much for the support and saying that we rule. We try our best to keep this channel running, to keep things on air, to keep things afloat, and to make sure the news keeps rolling. And folks like you who support this channel help us to make this thing possible. And if it wasn't for y'all, we wouldn't be able to be here right now. And so thank you so much for enjoying the work that we put into this, and thank you for appreciating it. I know a lot of people also add in appreciation for us doing this and managing that on top of undergrad and law school, which has been going on the entire time in the background that we've been doing this. But nevertheless, I think it's really all not about what we are able to balance all on one plate. It's more so about what we are able to do for y'all and getting the news out to y'all. And I thank y'all so much for appreciating that as we continue to do things in the background to keep our lives moving forward and hopefully not end up selling hot dogs at the county fair. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Margaret Hemsley, who puts in a $7 donation. And also, huge shout out to Margaret as well for sending us a very nice package.
It was
all
very
the way
nice.
from Australia. Very nice package, and thank you very much, Margaret, for going through all that trouble of sending it. And thank goodness it didn't get sent back, because I was scared for a minute that our post office had screwed something up and was sending it all the way back to Australia.
Dude, they did.
But
They
thank
did
you very
mess
much,
it up.
Margaret.
They did mess it up. I had to go in there and get the director of the post office to figure this out, because they just told me it was lost. They said, it's not here. I said, no, it is here. It says it's here. Go get your director or manager or whoever. And then they came out and said, listen, this says right here, this package is here. It needs to be here. And it turns out that they had some kind of a sorting issue, and they ended up putting it as a return and saying that nobody even picked it up and it wasn't even supposed to be there, although it was. So that thing was actually about to be put on a truck probably the next day and sent all the way back to Australia. So we are very lucky to have gone. I'm very lucky to have gone in there today and went, hey, come here. And be like, I need that package. Because if I hadn't done that, it would have ended up going all the way back to Australia. But I got to thank you so much, Margaret, for the support tonight and the kind words. And not only that, what you sent us. It was incredibly cool stuff. You sent medals from, I believe, the British and Australian Army. You sent a picture, I believe, of one of your family members, and it looks like he was in a World War I era uniform, which is really neat. Also, you sent a model F-16, really cool. We love model F-16s. Matthew really is a big fan of those. You also sent a little model rally car from an Australian race car driver, which I got to be honest with you, that was something that I was really liking. I was like, wow, that is so cool. But I got to thank you so much. Beyond all of the gifts, you have been an incredibly kind person, not only to us but to everyone in the Lee Spring Army. And I got to thank you so much once again for just being one of those people that really makes it worthwhile to get on stream and run this news each and every night, because kind-hearted, incredibly generous, and well-minded people like yourself are the folks that make this so worthwhile to do and to make sure that we're able to cover the news for y'all. And so thank you so much once again, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, Margaret said in her super chat, liked and shared with my family. I don't know or are interested in guns, but I will watch the gun reviews because you make anything interesting.
Oh, and thank you so much for that. I'm hoping that they are interesting. You know, we're not going to be like a normal gun review channel where they're all tactical, because I'm not tactical, you know, like I'm not. I just do my thing. I like doing stuff. I kid around and laugh. So we're probably going to kid around and laugh a lot while shooting guns. Obviously not be stupid and unsafe while doing that, but we're going to kid around and laugh a bit. So hopefully it'll be interesting for y'all to watch and maybe share a little bit more with y'all about the very in-depth and interesting world of small arms and their development around the world. But with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and we are more than happy to make anyone in the Lee Spring Army blush and make their day, because you all make our day every single time we're on air. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to CK Bold, who puts in a 5 and says, take a live chat question. And we shall, CK, and thank you very much for the support. And the live chat question goes to Barry Woodward, who says, why isn't there a more forceful reaction to the Houthis in the Yemeni Red Sea Strait? And are we building up to a hammer response or just being limp biscuit?
Barry, you are getting a monopoly on the live chat questions tonight. I think this is like the third one we've answered, but they're great questions, though. And to answer your question, I would say it's most likely just limp biscuit, because we don't really know why the response is so shallow and so slow at the moment. We have no idea, because beyond Iran backing them, there is no one else backing them, and there's not really a massive international incident that could come out of crushing the Houthis. So I don't know why. It really just does seem like limp biscuit handling of the situation, in my opinion. And I think we could have a much stronger response and actually crush the Houthis now before they may become a problem for the stability of the entirety of the Middle East later on down the road and become a more serious issue. But with that, hope that does address that well, and thank you once again for asking a very interesting question, Barry Woodward. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and we need to speed up a good bit,
Yeah,
because we have 10 more left. And this one goes to JC Atkins, who puts in a 5 and says, so are there any active duty U.S. airborne soldiers who have not earned their jump wings, and do they have a rank? Inquiring minds, ...
I wouldn't know. I don't really know that much about the airborne. I just know enough about the airbornes to say that some units' patches are cool, some of their histories are cool, among things like that, but I don't know enough about the whole jump side of things, because I don't really look into the airborne school that much, but I did know someone who went through it. But with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well, and with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to LSA Sergeant Figment once again, who puts in a 5. And so special shout out to the troopers of the 35th Brigade of the Israeli Ground Forces. Initiate, lead, make an example, and win.
Hey, and thank you so much for supporting LSA Sergeant Pigment, and a huge shout out to them, and I hope they're doing well right now with what's going on down there. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one also goes to Sarge yet again, and they said in this one, paratroopers are a different breed. And thanks for the recognition.
And thank you so much for the support. And paratroopers truly are a different breed. Unlike what someone was trying to insinuate earlier, I think the airborne forces are some of the most elite infantry forces out there on the field, regardless of what our favorite is, and mine is the 82nd Airborne, the 101st, the British Paras, the Fallschirmjäger, the French Airborne. All of them are incredible and amazing in every degree. They are truly setting the standard for what the top-of-the-line elite infantry look like out there, and I have to give a massive respect to them, along with all of the infantry that serve out there in all armed forces around the world, except for Russia. Except for Russia and China. But beyond that, huge respect to the airborne. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Michael Newman, who throws in a 5 and says, Fallschirmjäger. It says, also you can write that in some cases, and greetings from Germany, and LSA rocks.
And hello to Germany. I'm so sorry that we butchered Fallschirmjäger.
Anka.
Matthew, that's like that meme I showed you the other day where it's like, This is a Panzerschreck. It Schrecks Panzers. This is a Fallschirmjäger. It Jägers Fallschirm. This is a Fokker. It. That's it. Then he said the thing I can't say. But anyways, I'm so sorry that we butchered the word Fallschirmjäger. Sadly, I'm not that good at spelling German words, but it's a really cool name for the airborne forces of Germany. But still, thank you so much for correcting us on that. I wish we could have gotten the spelling down. And thanks to you, hopefully we will be able to if we bring that up again next time. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Neil Vizanot, who puts in a 5 and says, not being political at all, but just looking ahead, and with a no politics rule, will you guys stream on election day and any EU members not in NATO?
We will be most likely streaming on election day if the war is still going on by that point. Hopefully it's not. We always want to be optimistic with how short the war will last, but if election day comes around here in the United States, we will be streaming on that day, and of course we'll have the same rules as we had before. We're also not going to be covering the U.S. election whatsoever, because it's, of course, entirely political. The elections are literally as political as you can get here in the United States, or really any country around the world. So while we will be running on election day, if it falls on our normal streaming schedule, we will not be covering the election whatsoever. We're going to leave that to people who think that domestic politics and their opinion out of like the several 100 million opinions there are that are literally identical to each other, and there's only 2 major different versions of it, we'll leave them to think that they're really making a difference in the world by just spouting nonsense. We're actually going to do something that matters by making sure to continue to cover the war where the hundreds of Ukrainians are fighting and dying to defend their nation each and every day, which is far more important than some stupid squabble about some domestic policy issue in the United States. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Ranked Scrub, who puts in a 5 and says, what peace deal formats would you consider possible in Crimea?
Why were you gritting your teeth so hard right there? I can hear it.
I was trying to chew this gum, but I got caught in the middle of it. They said Crimea demilitarized in a separate state, and full return of Crimea, but Donbass gains held and frozen.
Yeah, at the moment we've heard rumors that there's possibly peace talks. I can hear that, Matthew. I can actually hear the gum. Like,
oh, really?
Yeah, I heard. I was like, ew, it's just like gross. Anyways, moving on into answering the question. Right now, we're hearing that there's supposedly some kind of a peace agreement that may be coming around down the pipe in between Ukraine and Russia. Possibly they're having secret peace talks, but I don't really know if they're happening. And on top of that, I don't think either of those conditions would be acceptable to the Ukrainians right now, because it looks like officially they're still on a hardline policy of trying to retake the occupied areas. So going off of that, I would have to say that most likely those options would be unacceptable. And I believe that even, like, one thing I will say, though, is that if the Ukrainians did end up giving away something, which I don't think they should, but let's just hypothetically say they will, it most likely will be the Donbass instead of Crimea, because Crimea needs to be needs to be retaken for strategic interests, not just for Ukraine, but also for the rest of the Western world. And I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of foreign pressure from the European Union and NATO as a whole for Ukraine to make sure that under any conditions, if they're only able to get just one thing back, it needs to be Crimea and Sevastopol. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are going to have a super chat cutoff. I thank everyone so much for the support, but sadly, we will not be able to address any super chats going beyond this point. I have to thank all of y'all so much once again for supporting tonight. Y'all's support has been absolutely incredible, and we want to make sure that we always have the time to address each and every one of y'all's support and to be able to thank y'all individually. So if you want to support this channel, make sure to show up tomorrow and throw in your support then, because we will be able to address it then. But sadly tonight, I believe we're running out of time, and I'm also going to have to go turbo mode to make sure that we can get through the rest of this. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Tim Morgan, who throws in a 5 and does not leave a comment. This time he says, actually, plus 30%. He's making up for the YouTube cut. And thank you very much, Tim. Enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you so much for the support, Tim, and making sure to throw in that extra little 30% cut. Of course, it's helping us to make sure to offset the amount that YouTube takes from the support. And hopefully we'll be able to circumvent that soon. But of course, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Philip Fixes LSA, who puts in a 5 and says you should go to 4 days a week and study. I know nobody here wants to show over the security of your future. And excuse me, by the way, he said, solve LC in a live chat question, please.
I'm gonna tell you something, I think. I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I thank you so much for the kindness of your statement there and trying to consider what's going on behind the scenes. But I do not want to compromise our news coverage at all, just on my account. I'm going to try and make sure to handle my future and the show at the same time because I want to make sure that y'all are happy with the kind of news coverage that we're putting out. Me being out because of the plague actually ended up affecting this channel a little bit as well. That also kind of hit us in the algorithms a little bit. And now for some reason YouTube just kind of has it out for us. But it still doesn't have us out as bad as that other guy, Matthew, who's getting like 800 live viewers at the peak now. Ooh! But anyways, still, thank you.
He needs to lay down the hot dogs. He don't want no more hot dogs.
Man, I gotta tell you, he's got to lay him down because some of them are getting slobbery at this point. He's just got to quit. But anyways, thank you so much once again for support. Hope that does address that well, and thank you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and up next, also shout out to Raphael Harris who put in that $5 donation, and thank you very much, Raphael, for the support. And also, shout out to Marc-Andre Burnett who also put in a 5, and Mark says, it is a privilege for me to listen to Crash Course of the History from the Enforcer. I'm 43, and I have lots of admiration for you both, and thank you. And that's very kind of you, Mark, and thank you very much.
And thank you so much for the kind words, Mark, and I thank you so much for enjoying the history lessons. I will admit I don't get everything right because I'm always trying to remember things off the cuff and also from usually reading or remembering it from years ago, but I still thank you so much for enjoying them because I love history, and it's just a big fascination of mine, and also it's what I got my degree, and I'm a bachelor's in history, meaning I will be unemployed. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that well, and with that, we're on to the next one.
And we're now moving on to our live chat questions. And up first, we have the Morse code decoders of the stream. We have Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Rumpelstiltskin, Toxic Bananas, Tightlines LSO, and we have a newcomer, David Millsaps.
Dang.
And they said tonight, the Morse code decipher is, so how are all of you doing tonight? Let me know in the chat. Long live the LSA.
And that's the sound of money. I'll get that dead on the nail. I got to thank y'all so much for always getting the Morse code message correct, even on day 659 of the war. And let me know in the live chat, how are y'all doing tonight? I know it's about 2 hours and 43 minutes in, but I want to know. And so with that, thank y'all so much for deciphering that Morse code message. And we're now going to be addressing 3 live chat questions due to time concerns, and then we're going to be rounding out the stream. So with that, we're on to the third to last question of the night.
And we only have 2. So this one goes to Wondering, who says, I was wondering, are those sacrificial waves of Storm Z a shadow genocide for Russia to make Russia more ethnically Russian? Throw ethnic minorities out of Russia and onto frontline assaults?
It's an interesting question, and one that's actually been thrown around a lot because a lot of ethnic minorities in Russia appear to be targeted exclusively for recruitment or conscription. It does appear that that may possibly be the case, but at the same time, I also think that that's not the direct goal. I think that the Russians may just view the smaller ethnic groups inside of Russia as more expendable than the white European or white Russian European core of Russia, considering that's the majority of their population. They are probably scared of pissing them off the most, because if anyone got pissed off and would be able to create a change, it would be the white Russian Europeans, because they are just the largest population group and therefore would be causing the biggest rock of the boat if they were to get pissed off. That is a little bit different than the people of the Caucasus Mountain regions, who, while being very numerous in the Caucasus, are much smaller in scale compared to the nearly, I think it's like 80 million white European Russians that live within Western Europe. That may be the reason why I don't feel like it's a direct idea to try and throw these folks onto the front lines to have them wiped out and to try and make Russia some kind of an ethnically homogenous state. I don't think that's the case, but I think that is an unintended side effect of their conscription and recruitment standards that they've been implementing inside of Russia, due most likely to racial or ethnic reasoning. But with that, I hope that does address that well, and we are on to the final question of the night. So, who is the lucky last person to turn the lucky last question of the night?
And this one goes to Barry Woodward, who says, do we have a list of what Russia still has currently?
Sadly, we don't. We have a lot of rough approximations on what they may have or may not have, but sadly, at this time, we don't really know what they have. They, in fact, have actually exceeded the amount of T-90Ms we thought they had at the beginning of the war. We thought they had around 30 of them, and then that number was revised to 50, and at this point, I believe they've lost around 60 T-90Ms. So apparently that number was off. So we don't really know, in some categories, how many vehicles they have left, but we have a feeling that it's greatly reduced from what they originally had at the beginning of the war. And so with that, I hope that does address that well, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank all of y'all so much once again for watching and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like y'all, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And I gotta thank every single one of y'all for always being here and enjoying this news. If you did tonight, make sure to hit that like button. It helps us out a lot, and we made it up to 2,200 likes nearly on the stream. Also, if you'd like to subscribe because you haven't been here before, make sure to do that and hit the bell button, because you'll be hopefully notified by YouTube when we run these streams, which is 6 days a week, except for Mondays at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, covering the past 24 hours of the war in Ukraine and picture and video evidence each and every day. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And good night, folks. We'll see you all tomorrow. Tomorrow, back to our normal little streaming area, not a hotel. And I hope you all enjoyed the stream. And good night. And good night to the hot dog as well.
The Lee Spring Army sends its regards.
Русские